Yeah, he's 10 minutes out, but we're going to start and stop.
Good afternoon, everyone. If you have your attention, please, I would like to call. Push.
Hello?
Hello? Good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to call the City Council meeting to order at this time. And we're going to go into recess until the mayor can get here.
And then I would also like to call a meeting of the Special Planning Commission together, and then we'll recess also. Thank you.
Thank you. The mayor will be here in about 10 minutes.
Thank you. Things are good. I know. You only get to talk to this very wonderful person. Yeah. It's coming along fine. Yeah. She's looking very well. Stop. Go.
Yes.
That'll keep you shut up. So that's good. Nice tie-in.
It's good.
They were
She'll be there.
What do you do?
I got one. I think it's a good thing.
She can devote more of her time to doing what she does best.
Just keep the chocolate chip cookies coming.
Oh, not for that. We're happy you're here.
How are you?
Because you know, one of them they keep
Okay.
We're all healthy. God bless you. Your don't change. I'll call you. You might not. He wants it. No, not me.
What time did you leave? Well.
Okay. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. The March 23, 2009 Special City Council meeting is called to order. This meeting has been properly noticed and posted in compliance with the open meeting law. Chairman Trowbridge, would you please open the Special Planning Commission meeting?
Thank you, sir. I'd also like to call the March 23rd, 2009 Special Planning Commission meeting to order.
Thank you. Has the meeting commenced?
Yes, sir.
It has. Has there been the pledge?
No, not yet.
All right. Would everyone please rise for the pledge?
Of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Yes. I'd like to welcome everybody to the wonderful Fifth Street Elementary School. It's a marvelous facility, part of our redevelopment efforts. the city goes, and it's being used for many multiple purposes for the entire community, and it really is a jewel for us to all enjoy. I owe an apology, I believe, for being late. This is the first time I've been late for anything, and I must have blown it because I was convinced that we were supposed to start at 1 o'clock. But I hope I haven't caused anybody inconvenience here. I saw Councilwoman Tarkanian earlier this morning, very early this morning, and I even mentioned to her at that time that I'll see you at 1 o'clock. So either I can't read straight or I was under the influence. I'm not sure. But whatever the issue was, it's passed. And as I say, if an apology is in order, please accept it. At this time, we'll move on to item number 4. Item number 4 is discussion and possible direction from members of the City Council and/or Planning Commission regarding the implementation strategies for establishing sustainability within the City of Las Vegas through the master plan, the zoning code, corridor plans, walkable community plans, and technology systems. Ms. Wheeler?
Thank you, Mayor, and thank everybody for being here today. It's a wonderful opportunity for us as the Planning and Development Department to talk about what has been occurring since your last joint workshop on sustainability in late 2007, and how now the importance of sustainability during this time of economic downturn provides opportunities for the city to move forward and mature in this new climate. Today, I'm pleased to introduce Mark Pisano, who is a senior fellow at USC's School of Policy, Planning, and Development, who will be the moderator today. Mr. Pisano, in addition to his position at USC, for more than 30 years was the CEO of SCAG, which is the Southern California Association of Governments, the largest MPO, that's Metropolitan Planning Organization in the country. So as you can see through this long experience heading this regional organization, he has a lot of background and will be sharing some of his thoughts and introducing the sessions for you today. I won't go any further, but introduce Mr. Pisano. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Wheeler. Mr. Pisano.
Thank you very much, Margot, for that brief introduction. Mr. Mayor, members of the Council, members of the Planning Commission, it is certainly a pleasure to be with you today, and it's always a pleasure, Mr. Mayor, to be in your great city. So I want to commend you and the city for all that you've done to make this one of the premier tourist and entertainment spots in not only the United States but the globe.
Let me just comments. I would like those recorded and sent to. I will share a few overview comments about 3 topical issues, namely the economy, secondly, demographic changes, and thirdly, global and environmental changes in terms of how they, in fact, may affect what a city can do through visioning to really reshape and take control of its future. Let me just start off with the economy. Richard Florida, in this month's Atlantic, has a lead article on what the crash will do to reshape America. And Florida is one of the premier writers on urban planning and the future of cities. And in this article, he basically argues or makes the case that what we're now experiencing is very similar, not to the Great Depression, but to the Long Depression of 1873. And in that particular economic downturn, what basically happened is that we had a financial crisis and collapse. That financial crisis and collapse then affected the future urban development patterns of the United States, and it really took us 13 years to get out to recover from that particular crash. And out of that crash, at the end of that time period, it basically ushered in the era of the suburbs. The suburban America really began to develop at that point in time. And Florida basically argues that this period that we're entering into has all the same trappings as that time period. And let me just share an experience that I went through in Southern California.
I was ahead of my organization when we experienced a depression in Southern California, and that was basically 1989, 1990, and 91. It was the end of the Cold War, and we went through the defense conversion, and at the same time, we opened up our borders to free trade, and lo and behold, our region lost 580,000 jobs, which was about 10% of our labor force. And let me just note, it took us 12 years to recover from that loss in terms of the region as a whole. And let me also note that the city of Los Angeles today hasn't recovered from that. It has fewer jobs in it today than it had in 1980. So these major economic cycles do have real impacts on the shape, size, and the growth and development of the country. Just a few other observations about Florida's article, and he specifically talks about cities in the sand. And the cities in the sands that he's referring to were the cities in Florida, the cities in Phoenix and Tucson in Arizona, Las Vegas in Nevada, and Riverside and San Bernardino in Southern California. And he basically notes that these were cities that grew and developed and flourished through the suburban development, and that he anticipates that coming out of this long recession, that they're not going to be able to rely on the same forces that they did for growth that led into their growth period and growth boom, namely from about 1990 to current day. And he also points out that those who rely on tourism, that if you look at the economic recovery, and if it is long-term, it'll be a very slow and steady but very protracted recovery for those areas. The second issue that I want to put on the table, and that is the question of demographics. What is happening in the United States today that will affect the growth and development of this country over the next several decades? One of my colleagues, Dow Myers, probably one of the best demographers in terms of understanding demography and then projecting and trying to relate that to economic development policies. Dow has argued in a recent piece that the demographic future, when you look out over the next 30 years, if you follow the trends of how people age, the change in the demographic characteristics and structure of our families, etc., and then you begin to look at how individuals form households, Dow puts forth the hypothesis that post about 2014-15, that what you're going to see is a massive movement away from single-family detached dwelling units, and that the consumers and the individuals that are forming households will form different kinds of households with different needs and associated with different development patterns. And he went on to say that in the 20s and late 20s, that probably one of the commodities that would be very great, that needs to rethink itself, is the large stock of single-family dwelling units who were primarily baby boomers that formed and moved into the housing cycle, that stock of housing may not have the buyers that it needs to sustain its economic wealth and value. Now, Dow wrote that piece about a year and a half ago, and lo and behold, in the last year and a half, about 30 to 40% of the wealth or the value of the single-family detached dwelling unit has now it's disappeared in the last economic downturn. And if these economic forces continue, then it means we're going to build a different housing stock in different locations and in different patterns. It's not to say that there won't be housing needs. That's not what Dow argues at all. In fact, he's saying that there will be an increased demand for housing stock, but it'll be of a different kind. And it'll be in different locations. And his plea in this article was that local officials, the heads of councils, planning committees, take stock of the demographics and the markets that you're in fact going to be planning for and prepare for it. And let me just note, in our region, every single major home builder, their major units in the last 10 years has been their infill units. I don't care whether it's Kaufman Broward. I mean, I can list the housing developers, and I can have you to talk to the heads of the production units in those firms that are doing the best in our region, and this trend has already begun within our region. The third issue that I want to just briefly touch on is the question of the global environment, and it's the issue of climate change, of global warming, carbon footprints, the fact that carbon-based energy sources are in fact going to either, one, become more expensive because they're becoming more dear, or secondly, they're going to become more expensive because the impacts, the externalities, or the emissions, or the discharges of carbon-based fuels are going to be more expensive. They're either going to be taxed. We're going to have either national or international policies to deal with them. And what that will do is it'll make the current transportation system more expensive. And it'll continue to tax in one form or another the American consumer as it relates to their transportation. Now you put these three forces together, the economy and what this structural shift in the economy will do, the demographics and who's going to purchase units, who's going to be entering the marketplace, and then you put on top of that the cost and price and penalties that we're going to be paying because of the globalization of the environment. Those forces are going to push us in policy directions to rethink our cities. I can't think of anything, Mr. Mayor and the council members and planning committee members, that you can do that's more important in your city than to put together the vision and put together the approaches so that you can prepare this city for the century that it's now going to be, that it's now moving into. And the workshop today has been organized. You're going to have presentations. I will present a little later some examples of what we did in Southern California in an area similar to this from my own experience, and then you'll have other video presentations to help you understand and prepare yourself to develop the vision that will chart a positive course for this great city of yours. And next, I would like to introduce Tom Peringo, the Deputy Director, to make some presentation and comments.
Mayor Goodman. Mayor Goodman.
Yes.
Is this a good time to ask Mr. Pisano a few questions, or Mr. Pisano, would you be coming back later? Because I do have some questions in regards to some of the comments that he made. So what would be a good time to have that discussion?
What do you suggest, Ms. Wheeler? Is this a good time?
I think it was suggested that when I come back for later comments that I can be prepared, and I'll be happy to address any of your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Pisano. He will be talking a little bit more as soon as I'm done. Mayors, members of the council, Mr. Chairman, members of the Planning Commission, if I do my job right in the next 15 or 20 minutes, I'll make a link between sustainability, some of the things that Mr. Pisano was talking about, and land use. I wanted to start out talking about a little bit of a recap of what we did in 2007 when we talked about sustainability at that workshop. We talked about the definition of sustainability in the city manager's policy, meeting the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their needs. And it talks about the sort of the three-legged stool of sustainability, the economy, the environment, and community, otherwise known as people, planet, profit. You have to take care of all of these things in your decisions in order to create a sustainable city. We talked a little bit about climate change. What we're relatively certain about is that the concentrations of greenhouse gas emissions is increasing in the atmosphere. We're relatively certain that that's from human activity, and we're pretty certain that that's going to change the climate. The thing that we're not real certain about is how much is that going to impact the climate. So what does sustainability have to do with greenhouse gas emissions or climate change? Sustainability is all about using our resources efficiently. It's about reducing waste and saving money. And if we do these things, then we will lower our greenhouse gas emissions. Building and transportation are the largest sources of greenhouse gas emissions, accounting for about 70% of all emissions. And it also presents the greatest opportunity to improve efficiencies, to reduce waste, and to save money. Sustainability is good for business. 80% of Fortune 500 sustainability directors have indicated that this year they will be increasing their spending on sustainability, even in this down economy. That's a 73% increase overall for Fortune 500 companies, 73% increase in spending overall Fortune 500 companies in the next 2 years on sustainability. They recognize that it's important in order to increase their revenues, to control their costs, and for brand recognition. Dollars for U.S. labor, not foreign oil. That one's pretty obvious. We spend about 100 to 200 billion of our defense money on in regions that supply us with oil. So sustainability can be thought of again as using our resources efficiently, saving money, reducing our waste, and also it's like buying an insurance policy against the potential that climate change as a result of increased emissions in the atmosphere will be bad. So, given that buildings and transportation are the largest source of emissions and the largest opportunities for improved efficiencies, that's why we talk about land use. It's very important. A quarter of all the homes in Las Vegas today have been built in the last 8 years, predominantly in subdivisions that are single-family detached units, typically surrounded by a block wall, punctuated by cul-de-sacs, with very few ways to get in and out, very long blocks on the perimeters that aren't very well protected for pedestrians or bicyclists from the sun or from adjacent automobile use. Every single one of these subdivisions, well, the majority of these subdivisions absolutely require the use of an automobile for every trip to the store, every trip to school, every trip to work, every trip to the park. The way these are designed requires a tremendous amount of automobile use. The argument has been that we've built these subdivisions in this manner because it's what the market's demanded, it's what the consumer wants. So why should we be rethinking this? There are a few reasons. World energy consumption is projected to increase 50% between 2005 and 2030. How long can we keep increasing our energy consumption? As Mr. Pisano said, the cost for control of carbon emissions is going to increase. One estimate, 5 to 15% increase in electricity costs, 12 to 50% natural gas, 9 to 145% gasoline. That's a pretty big margin, but if it's anything above 10% and anywhere near the 100%, that's going to cause havoc. Sustainability in the built environment buildings, the average energy cost for households has doubled since 2001. In Nevada alone, electricity costs have risen 59% between 2000 and 2008 compared to 32% nationally. Did you know that in the 90s we paid 10% less for electricity here in Nevada than the U.S. average? Today we pay 13% more. In terms of transportation, vehicle miles traveled, that's the amount of the distance that we travel in our cars, has increased 3 times the rate of population growth since 1980, 2 times the rate of registration growth of registered vehicles. Household spending on gas is up $100 billion since 2000 in the U.S. Typical household is spending 20% of their income on automobiles. That's 20% of their income for an asset that depreciates relatively quickly. VMT is a big story here. Even with increasing fuel economy of vehicles and alternative fuels, the rate of growth in the miles that we travel is going to offset any increases in fuel economy. Per capita vehicle miles traveled in Las Vegas between 01 and 06 up 3.3%. Miles traveled in Clark County 14 billion in 2007. I did the math. That works out to about $1.5 to $2 billion spent on gasoline. If you can imagine even 10% reduction in vehicle miles traveled, that's about $100–200 million available for spending in the local economy on products other than gasoline that will create jobs. Other costs have to do with infrastructure costs, roads, sewer, flood control, parks, public safety. CIP budget about $600 million in 2009 for capital projects, infrastructure, $1.86 billion between 2009 and 2013 planned capital improvements in the city to serve a community with an assessed valuation of about $24 billion. Just streetlights alone, $4 million annually in energy. That's about a third of our total energy costs. And as we are painfully aware right now, public sector costs are growing faster than public sector revenues. So an alternative is more of a compact development with a mixture of land use. It's been proven to reduce vehicle miles traveled 20 to 40%. More compact development pattern can reduce energy costs by 40%. More people with higher densities share the costs of the capital costs of infrastructure and maintenance. Creates with a mixture of land uses. When you have commercial, residential, and high-density residential all mixed in, you have more higher assessed valuation. So it all boils down to greater efficiency, lower costs, and lower greenhouse gas emissions. Does this mean that everybody should live in a high-rise in downtown? The answer is no. But what it does point out is that there are opportunities to create a more walkable population and employment centers in all areas of the community, in the master plan communities, in the new growing areas, in the neighborhoods adjacent to downtown, appropriate level of community services and mixture of land uses for those neighborhoods. So I took a look at some of the changing real estate values in the community. This chart shows the price per square foot of residential units, and you can see the big increase from 2004 to 2007, and then the big decline in the last couple of years. Unfortunately, this doesn't. Well, the bottom line shows what the price change would have been if it held constant at about 4.5%, what it was between 98 and 2002. So I was sort of curious as to how this was maybe different around the valley. This shows the change in real estate values by square foot by census tract from 2000 to 2008. The red census tracts had the greatest price appreciation of residential real estate over that period. That's sort of a tan color, the darker tan color. The reds are over 100%. Those tan colors are about 70 to 100%, and then so on. I was also curious, though, the real estate was increasing over the last 8 years, but it also has declined dramatically. How are these census tracts holding their real estate value? This map shows a decline in real estate values from 2006 to 2008. The dark red had the least decline. The next sort of darkest, I guess an orange color, had the next least decline. So you see that, I wish I had a way to point this out. For example, it's not picking that up, is it? In the neighborhoods just west of downtown, west of Rancho, they had some of the least decline in residential real estate values, as well as some of the master plan communities, and Census Tract 301, which is Union Park, and the area just north of downtown. This map shows the sales from banks, which is mostly foreclosures. The darker colors had the most amount of sales, and it stands to reason it's in the newer areas that have been built recently. So then I wanted to go ahead and look at what does this mean in terms of mix of land uses, in terms of valuation, and so on. So I developed a sort of a scorecard. Now, this isn't a scientific study. This is just a guy with a GIS and some assessor's data trying to understand a little bit about these census tracts that seem to have held their value better than other census tracts at the same time that they had some of the best, highest increases in value. So I looked at overall for the city, the average density for dwelling units per acre, 4.2. Assessed value per acre, $362,000. Typical land use mix, 79% residential, 13% commercial, 8% public. Single family, multifamily mix, 60% single family, 40% multifamily. Overall walk score, and Flynn will talk more about this later, 55 on a scale of 0 to 100. So the first neighborhood I looked at is the neighborhood that includes Union Park. That red one just sort of right in the middle there. Some of the amenities, Union Park, premium outlets, cohesive established neighborhoods, the BRT runs through there. This area had a scorecard, density of 10.1 compared to 4.2 for the city. Assessed value per acre, $788,000. Land use mix, 45% residential, 39% commercial, 16% public. Single family to multifamily, 45% single family, 55% multifamily with a walk score of 80.
Hey, can I ask a question? When you're saying West Las Vegas, what are you, I want to just know the difference between my ward and Ricky's. Where are you
Well-
westing?
Unfortunately, I can't, the pointer doesn't work.
Okay. Well, Union Park would be Ward 3. I'm just trying to,
this census tract is the one we just went over.
Okay.
Union Park area, and this gets sort of up into the West Las Vegas area.
okay.
Old west side.
And did you see that?
It's the old west side.
Right. If you just repeat what you just stated, because the councilwoman,
Did you
had
say
mentioned it
that held the best?
held the best as far as walkability or something to that effect?
Yes, that particular area had a greater than 100% price appreciation in residential properties between 2000 and 2008, and also had the least price depreciation over the last 2 years when the market's been crashing.
You're saying it had the greatest and the least, then?
The greatest appreciation over an 8-year period from 2000 to 2008, and during the time when the market's been coming back down, 2006 to 2008, it's had the least depreciation. So the overall appreciation is the highest. The overall depreciation during the last 2 years when the market's been coming down has been the least. So it's held its values better than other census tracts. And compared to the city, if you go back to the scorecard, it had a density that's more than double the typical density in the city. It had an assessed value per acre, again, more than double the average for the city. It had a land use mix that's very much mixed between residential and commercial, and more multifamily units, and a very high walkability score compared to the city. The next neighborhood that I looked at are the census tracts that are just west of Rancho, south of 95. Those sort of, I guess, tan census tracts just west of the red area. Are we oriented?
I know, I think that's where I live, but
So some of the amenities of this downtown adjacent area that has the Red Rock Downtown Trail, the medical district, schools, commercial along Rancho and Charleston, has a scorecard, 8.1 dwelling units per acre, double the city average. Assessed value per acre, $423,000, compared to the city was in the 300s. Land use mix, 65% residential, 31% commercial, 4% public. Single family to multifamily, 49% single family, 51% multifamily, with a walk score of 78. The overall city is 55. The next neighborhood we looked at is in the lakes. If you look at the very southwestern part of the city, there's that one tan census tract down there. Would you like me to point it out? This area here, when we get done with this one, we'll do somewhere in the center. So it's this area right down here in the lakes. Again, the amenities of walking trails and green belts, grouped retail, and pocket parks. Scorecard, density 7.3 dwelling units per acre, a little bit higher than the city average, but less than some of the downtown neighborhoods. Assessed value per acre, $600,000, nearly double the city average. Land use mix, 78% residential, 20% commercial, 2% public. Single family to multifamily, 52 to 48, whereas the overall city is 60-40, with a walk score of 58. Now this is less walkable, but it still has those amenities and the land use mix that creates that value, that keeps those assessed values up. And of course, those assessed values translate into revenues for the public sector. So the final area we'll look at, and I apologize, I was hoping to be able to point these out with the pointer, but is Summerlin Center. It's along Charleston there, the far west of the city. Amenities, cluster of retail and restaurants, walking paths, linear parks, office, and then Red Rock Resort. Scorecard density, Red Rock Resort really isn't in this particular census tract. Scorecard density, 9.3 dwelling units per acre. So this is a brand new master plan community with a very relatively high density. Assessed value, $696,000 per acre. Land use mix, 46% residential, 37% commercial, 17% public. Single family to multifamily, 55 to 45, with a walk score of 74. So these sorts of amenities are achievable in the newer master planned areas. So that is just a very quick run through of some of the reasons that I think we need to be rethinking how we develop the city. It really boils down to energy use. It's about the electricity we use in our buildings. It's about the vehicle miles traveled with our automobiles. And how can we be more efficient with those resources, reduce the amount of money that we spend on the automobiles to create more wealth and spending in other areas of the economy that will create jobs. So that's my presentation. Are we? Okay. Yes. And then Mr. Pisano's got some more.
While they're loading this up, let me just say I'm going to very quickly, and I'm not going to present, I'll go quickly over some of the slides, but I wanted to share some of the insights that I gained working with my cities on developing a new vision for how they wanted their cities in the region to grow. Let me just very quickly, we're on the left-hand side of the screen. We started a visioning process. It took us 4 years to finish this process, and we had over 5,000 meetings throughout our region. We had hundreds of elected officials engaged in the process. Granted, we're a larger region, but the elected officials really used this as their opportunity to chart the course for their city and the region. We focused on several goals. Those are the 4 goals. They're very similar to what Margot and Tom are talking to you about. This is just a scatter pattern for our region before we started the visioning process as to what the region would look like over a 20-year time period. And this is what the region looked like after we finished the process. And mind you, this is suburban Southern California. And these cities were willing to get a hold of some of these ideas. This is a picture of the region, and it's a picture of the plan that's summarized in one simple diagram with one simple phrase. We changed 2% of the urban landmass, and the urban landmass was not downtown LA. It was distributed across the region. We changed 2% of the landmass, and we totally changed the way the region performs. And I'll show you a few examples, and the examples that I'm going to use are from Orange County. The lines that you see on the map are new transit, bus-on-transit systems, and some fixed rail transit that Orange County, Southern California, is not only is planning but is today implementing. These are the transit areas with some of the centers surrounding the transit. This is one typical street in the city of Huntington Beach, and this is what it looks like as we went through the development. Here's another city. This one is in Costa Mesa. You can see the change in the development patterns, and this one is the city of Orange and the change in the development pattern. The character of the community did not fundamentally change. The people in the communities loved the kinds of development that is being forward. Currently in Southern California, 50 cities throughout the region are changing their general plans to accommodate these principles, and more importantly, they're building it. And in fact, they were the buildings that were most supported as we went through the development phase in the last decade. At the end of the day, what were the benefits? Improved job housing balance, conservation of open space, and we took older urban areas, they were renovated into wealth-generating activities and wealth-generating parts of our region. Our transit system became more productive by changing the pattern around our transit. And we're heavily investing in transit in Southern California. We're going to be able to double the ridership without spending one more dollar in transit. It just makes the transit more productive. I'll skip the goods movement portion and go to the last chart, and that is we will reduce vehicle miles traveled within our region somewhere between 9 and 12%. We will reduce CO emissions by even greater amounts. And furthermore, our region, using a combination of growth and development, land use and transportation and transit expenditures, we will be able to deal with probably the most difficult air quality problem within the country. Let me just go to the last slides. I'm not going to take you through these various suites of services, but let me just point out a couple of them. Where you see LA lots and tipping point analysis, what we did is that we converted every general plan in our region, and using the data from the assessor's office, we converted every single parcel and every general plan into the same kind of pro forma analysis that developers use when they move forward to approve projects. We were able to show our communities not only the increased walkability, but also the increased return on investment. Not only increased return on investment that go to the developers, and I mentioned the developers were the infill unit portions of their operations were the most profitable up until the crash. But it also showed the increased return on investment and the increased value and the increased taxes that would go to our jurisdictions. And it also showed where, as you increase the value of an area, that you not only can derive increased profitability for developers, but you also can increase the financial streams that come to cities. And that this makes dollars and cents. We were convinced that in the culture of planning in Southern California, unless we converted these principles into the dollar and cents decisions of development, that we would really be able to sustain the infill and the restructuring of the urban form, unless we made it a dollars and cents issue, which we have. And let me finish with that and note that we're going to have, I think, one more presentation, the video, and then Margot suggested that after the video, when you've had a further chance to visualize this, that Tom and Margot and I be available to address your questions. Councilman, could we wait until then, if that would be okay? Okay. We'll next then, Mr. Mayor, go to the slide presentation.
If I may, the reason I want to do, we have a video presentation by Chris Lineberger, one of the primary writers from the development community with regard to where we move forward. And again, the emphasis today is to talk about the economics of these changes, not so much sustainability for sustainability's sake. This is a presentation that I saw at ULI's placemaking conference in Denver last fall. And again, you will see the slideshow and hear the voice of Chris Lineberger. And I hope that this will bring together the topics we're talking about today, and then we'll be able to take questions. And then this is the last of the presentation of the current situation as it's relevant to Las Vegas. And then after we take your questions, then we'll talk about the Planning and Development Department's ideas as to where we go from here. So if we could have the video presentation now, please.
Okay, thank you all for being here. This is our final plenary session, and as you will find out, we have an extremely distinguished panel today that will follow our featured speaker. Our featured speaker is Christopher Lineberger. Christopher is one of those unusual, unique people in the world who can freely migrate between the worlds of academia and business and be equally comfortable and successful in both. That is a very rare practitioner indeed. In addition to being a personal friend, Chris Lineberger is a land use strategist, real estate developer, consultant, and author. He is director and professor of the Graduate Real Estate Program at the University of Michigan and Brookings Institution in Washington, D.C. He has focused his research and practices on transforming traditional and suburban downtowns and other places into what he calls walkable urbanity, which I know he will discuss with you. He is also a professor of practice and director of the Graduate Real Estate Development Program at the University of Michigan. He's a founding partner of Arcadia Land Company, a progressive real estate development firm which has projects in Independence, Missouri and the Philadelphia metropolitan area. Chris has written many award-winning articles for publications such as the Atlantic Monthly, the Wall Street Journal, and Urban Land Magazine, among others. We're really very fortunate to have Chris today. He's one of those unusual speakers that understands all the dimensions of the real estate industry from both an academic and a business point of view, and I'm sure we'll all enjoy his comments. Chris? while you've been here, there's been great destruction, as you've seen in this morning's, the only thing free you've gotten here, this morning's Wall Street Journal. I'm going to talk about this today because we in real estate have managed twice in the last 3 busts in this country, brought down the country's economy. This is the second of 3 times. And we have just barely begun. And it's about the topic that we're talking about here today. Because there's a structural shift taking place in this country, and we're on the cutting edge, or we're on the bleeding edge, of how we build the built environment. And what we're all here trying to learn is how to shift from being a NASCAR driver to learning how to fly fighter jets. A race car driver goes along at 150 miles an hour, they go right, they go left, they go straight forward in a 2-dimensional plane. What we have to learn is flying at 600 miles an hour, going right, going left, going forward, but also tremendous highs, and we can crash and burn in a nanosecond in 3 dimensions. Fundamentally different skill sets. That's why this conference has always been so successful over the years as we in real estate try to retool. But, you know, it is a topic everywhere. Obviously, urban land has been on the cutting edge of this. Congressman urbanism has been on the cutting edge of it. But you probably haven't seen this month's copy of Shopping Center Business. I'm sure it's home next to your bedstand. But, I mean, ICSC gets it. The only folks that don't really get it tend to be the home builders and NAIOP, that they like to live back in the 20th century. But we know that there's a structural change going on. You know, 10 years ago, all these magazines, Urban Land Magazine, all they had was stories about master planned communities. And Shopping Center Business was all about power centers. It's obviously changed. On the other hand, there's a lot of folks out there who still are doing things the old-fashioned way. This, unfortunately, is a friend of mine's project outside of San Francisco. It was in a very prominent position in the New York Times business section, front page above the fold. This was his project portrayed. It's been sitting out in the sun of the Central Valley for the last year. It's bulldozer bait that these buildings will have to be knocked down. But this reflects this housing crisis that we're in the middle of. This reflects the financial crisis. And it is all about the structural change. The reason that you're at this conference right now. Some basics. First off, you may not know this, but the built environment, real estate, and the infrastructure that supports real estate is 35% of the asset base of the country. It's the largest asset class in the entire economy. If you wanted to happen to buy the U.S., you'd be stroking a check for about $210 trillion. After yesterday, it's now about $205 trillion. And of which about a third of that would buy the built environment. Would buy everybody's homes, shopping centers, office buildings, city halls, and the roads in front of all of them. It's a very slow changing asset class. We only add 2-3% per year to it. So decisions we make today, they hang around for decades to come. But grow we are. This country is growing in absolute terms faster than any country on the planet. We'll add 100 million people sometime in the late 2030s, early 2040s, faster than only India and China. The other thing about the built environment is that we managed to contribute over 70% to CO2 emissions and other greenhouse gases. We are obviously by far the biggest contributor to greenhouse gas emissions. That also is in parallel to the energy usage. They go hand in hand. That's about 40% for the buildings, 30% for our transportation system to get around to our buildings. The thing about transportation, though, and why this conference is so important, because it focuses on TOD, is that transportation drives development. The transportation system we, the people, invest in has always dictated the built environment. If we decide to only build car-based and truck-based transportation, we will only get drivable suburban development opportunities. If we put in a balanced transportation system, which is at its base walkable, we can build high-density walkable urban development. But the transportation system comes first, and you'll hear from the panel later on about the importance of those transportation investments to allow us in real estate to build the products that we want to build. Another piece of background that's important to note is, and you probably all know this, there's only two kinds of places: local serving, bedroom communities, and regionally significant places. We're going to focus today on the regionally significant places. These are places which have major employment concentrations, cultural concentrations, urban entertainment, universities. These are places that give the metropolitan area its reason to exist. Now, over the last 5,500 years since we've been building cities, there's only two ways to build our cities. Believe it or not, there's just two ways. And for most of those 5,500 years, we built walkable urban places. Places that, within walking distance, we've heard a lot about that today and yesterday, within 1,500 to 3,000 feet, you can get most of your daily needs met, or you can hop onto some mode of transportation, preferably transit, and get most of your everyday needs met. Well, we started a major social experiment about 50, 60 years ago that swung that pendulum all the way over to the other side, where we in this country only built drivable suburban product. And we wanted to. This is market-driven. Our parents, our grandparents really wanted to live in these drivable suburban places. And it became our de facto domestic policy in this country. It became also the largest social engineering project that this country's ever done. The elements were that we only made drivable suburban development legal. From a zoning point of view, that's all you can do. Setbacks, high parking ratios, wide boulevards, zoning dictated, low-density drivable suburban. We also provided massive subsidies to put in all the infrastructure. Real estate studies show that we would have to increase impact fees between 10 and 20 times on the fringe for that fringe development to pay its own way. We wanted to do it. We subsidized it. We made it legal. That's what the people wanted. That's what the people got. The finance industry, which is crumbling under the weight of this, really got to understand. They began to commoditize real estate. They commoditized drivable suburban real estate. And the reason we're in this mess today is because the finance industry took it to a little bit of an extreme. And then finally, we in real estate, we got really good as NASCAR drivers, and it's really hard to teach an old dog new tricks. Where has that policy led us on the ground? Where it's led us is that we've built metropolitan areas over the last 40, 50 years, and for every 1% population growth, we've increased land consumption between 8 and 12%. Even in Jim Ratner's hometown of Cleveland, which has not been growing, they've been tremendously expanding land use consumption in spite of a decreasing population in the metro area as a whole. So this drivable suburban development that we got so good at building, it really used up something that we in America have more than we know what to do with, a lot of land. If you knew three things about any metropolitan area in the country, you could pretty much tell where it's grown. If you knew where the white upper middle income housing concentration was, and it always concentrated, if you knew where the local minority housing concentration was, which tended to be on the other side of town, and if you knew the freeway system, you pretty much could tell where 80-90% of all job growth and most of the infrastructure investment went. And it went in a 90-degree arc coming out of downtown, which is referred to as the favored quarter. The favored quarter coming out of downtown. In Atlanta, it went to the north. In Kansas City, it goes to the south. In Denver, it goes to the south. In Seattle, it goes to the east. And it's where we sprawled the most. that these metropolitan areas have grown phenomenally. I was down in Atlanta last week and reminded them that I made the quip a few years ago that Metro Atlanta was the fastest growing human settlement in human history. And they all agreed it was. But just as we got really good at building this stuff, back in the mid-90s, we began to see that the market began to change. And I know all the developers, all my development friends back there were saying, damn it, why don't they just accept the good old stuff that we know how to build? But that pendulum began to come back, demanding the alternative to drivable suburban product. They want walkable urban. And it's a basic structural shift in how we invest that 35%. And the reason for the financial crisis out there, it just got started with the subprime. The major reason for it is that we've built a lot of wrong product in the wrong location that the market does not want, and I don't think it ever will want. And that front page image from the New York Times is going to be the testament of this structural change as the pendulum has begun to swing back. The reasons for it, I blame the kids. It's all millennials' fault. That they went and grew up watching TV shows like Seinfeld and Friends and Sex and the City, and they said, I want that kind of lifestyle. Actually, it was a reflection of the consumer research that Hollywood did. Hollywood does more consumer research than even the home building business. It was a reflection of where that generation, the rising generation, those in their 20s and 30s today, want to live. Unlike us gray hairs who were raised on Leave It to Beaver and Dick Van Dyke, all set in the suburbs, that the millennials want something different. Obviously, we baby boomers are becoming empty nesters, and many of us are deciding to go back to the city, to go back to other walkable urban places, but it's really being driven by my students up at the University of Michigan. It's all their fault. It's also demographically driven. When I was growing up, 50% of households had children living in the household, 50% did not. Today, 1/3 of all households have children living in them. 2/3 do not. The couples and singles that make up those households that do not have children living in them, they're the target market for walkable urban development, high-density walkable urban product. Well, in the future, of this tremendous population growth that we're going to see and the new households created, only 12% of the net new increase in households will have children living in them. 88% will be singles and couples. So, if you believe, like I do, why do you rob banks? The reason is that that's where the money is, or at least it used to be. And here today, if you want to serve the heart of the market, you're serving singles and couples who want something different than a 6,000 square foot house out on the fringe. There's also a basic boredom factor with drivable suburban. And also the thing about drivable suburban is that as you build more, the very things that we promised the drivable suburban household, it gets worse. As you build that next strip mall, nobody's there to welcome you when you build that strip mall. They organize a neighborhood group and fight you. Because as you build more, you get less quality of life. Obviously, the cost of energy is a big factor in this, but it's just accelerating an underlying market trend. So what that means is that there's pent-up demand for this stuff. A study that a friend of mine and colleague at the University of Michigan put together showed that there's about 30-40% of us want walkable urban, 30-40% of us want drivable suburban, and 30% could go either way. However, when you look at the supply side, here in Denver is doing a reasonably good job on the supply side. If there's 10% of the product out there on the market, both new product and resale, that is walkable urban, I'd be surprised. So, huge pent-up demand based upon what we've been building over the last 2 generations. Major study by a colleague of mine, Chris Nelson, showed that over the next 20 years, there's going to be a loss in demand of 22 million housing units that are large lot single family. 1/3 of the large lot single family homes will have a hard time finding buyers. Those are the homes that are on the ground now. While the entire demand for new housing will be in small lot and attached product. What that has led to is a price premium that my research shows is between 20 and 200% on a price per square foot basis that walkable urban product gets, whether it be office, retail, housing. That people are willing to pay 40% more on a price per square foot basis, 200% more. Let me show you some examples. Here's a lovely, not fringe, but upper middle income housing district outside of Washington called Great Falls. Very high-end housing, luxurious housing. Here are two homes. One's 7,000 square feet on the left, one's 9,000 square feet with a swimming pool, a tennis court, and room for a pony. And both on lots that are roughly 2 acres in size. Both are selling for between $1.7 and $2 million. That comes down to about $230 a square foot. That is just about replacement cost for this property. This is in a high-end district. Now take a look at comparable product in the District of Columbia, which 20 years ago was bankrupt and nobody wanted to move into. There's a product on your left, which is a $1.9 million townhouse that is selling for $603 a square foot and it moves quickly. It is 2.6 times those other housing product types. That's very typical of what we're seeing throughout the country, is that kind of price premiums. These places were nearly slums 20 years ago. They have rebounded. And one of the major reasons or in fact the major reason is that they're walkable urban. If you haven't checked out WalkScore, walkscore.com, the WalkScore rates any address in the country on a 0 to 100 scale. 0 means that you're completely car dependent. 100 means that you don't need a car. The previous homes had a walk score of 9. You have to use your car to go to the bathroom. These walk scores are in the mid-80s. Within 3 blocks of these houses are 200 restaurants, all sorts of retail, all sorts of employment. That's what the market wants. We have to figure out how to deliver it. Here's one more example, which is it's Bethesda, Maryland, right outside the district. Here's a drivable suburban house, 5,500 square feet, a 14,000 square foot lot, $1.5 million, walk score of 28, so rather car dependent, $272 a square foot. You go about a mile away from it, where there's a walk score, it's a condo unit, 95 walk score. It's selling for $739 per square foot. Again, 2.7 times. That's pent-up demand for this kind of product. Now, this whole issue of gas prices has gotten a lot of press, of course, and its impact on housing. It's important to note, take a look on the right side, that the average household in this country, 19% of the household budget goes towards transportation. But now take a look at number 2. The drivable suburban household, 25% of their household budget goes to transportation. That's money that we in this room want to capture and have them put it into a house. So take a look at number 3 on the left-hand side, where the walkable urban households in this country, on average, they only spend 9% of their budget on transportation. That 16% is household spending capacity that we in real estate are capturing to pay for the walkable urban product that we are hopefully providing. But as I say, these places are very different, much more complex. Flying a fighter jet is an entirely different kettle of fish. You've got to have a strategy to be successful. You've got to manage these places, primarily through a business improvement district. But each element you add to a walkable urban place, it just gets better. That next restaurant you add just adds more people to the street and starts an upward spiral of value creation, thus creating that price premium that I was just talking about. Now, we're finding that these places in our metro areas, regionally significant walkable urban places, seem to be landing in 5 different types of places. Traditional downtowns, downtown adjacent, suburban town centers. These are 18th, 19th century suburban towns built before the car that have a great grid and begin to come back. Suburban redevelopment. You may have seen one example yesterday, that one of the best example in the country so far is Belmar, southwest of here. And suburban greenfield development, so-called lifestyle centers. This is one of the strangest terms we've come up with in real estate. The first 2, downtown and downtown adjacent, are in the center city. The other 3 are in the suburbs. So this is not about the death of the suburbs. This is about the transformation of the suburbs, as well as the rebirth of many of our center cities. Washington right now, Washington, D.C., is the model of where the country's going. It has more examples of walkable urban places than any place else. Where you want to look and why this conference is held here as far as the future growth of walkable urbanism in this country is right here in Denver because of fast tracks. So if you want to see something, if you want to see the future now, come to Washington. If you want to see the future unfold, the best example right now in the country is here in Denver. Right now, Washington, a metro area of 5.3 million people, have 20 critical mass walkable urban places. Those 20 places are, about 30% of them are in the center city, 70% are in the suburbs. 90% of them are rail transit served. There's another 10 more emerging. This represents hundreds of billions of dollars of redevelopment over the last 10, 15 years. And there's more per capita than any place else in the country. Take another metro area like Atlanta, where I was last week, as I mentioned. It's the exact same size, about 5 million people. It also has a subway system built back in the 70s, one of the 3 that were built back in the 70s. But they've not taken advantage of that great subway system. They've only got 5 or 6 walkable urban places. The big question for all of you and for Atlanta is, where will the other 24 or 25 walkable urban places go? Denver's answering that question. In your metropolitan areas, where will they go? Did a survey at Brookings back about 6 months ago that came out looking at the top 30 metro areas. Found that there are 157 regionally serving walkable urban places in the country. D.C., as I mentioned, had the most. Boston, San Francisco, Denver, and Portland were 2nd, 3rd, 4th, and 5th. Interestingly, New York was 10 as far as per capita. I got a lot of phone calls from the New York press saying, "What do you mean? We're number 1." And I said, "Manhattan's number 1." But Manhattan, which has great concentration of phenomenal walkable urbanism, is only 8% of the population of the metropolitan area. So 8% of the population is living like Seinfeld. The other 92% are spread between 4 states, living at a density that is lower than Los Angeles, living like Tony Soprano. And they've got tremendous opportunities out in the suburbs that they're not taking advantage of. And that's true in many of our metropolitan areas. So let me show you some examples. Here's downtown D.C. 10 years ago, 11 years ago. Downtown D.C. is a place that you wouldn't be caught dead in. 10, 12 years ago. Then again, you might have been caught dead. It was a dreadful place. Here it is today. It's almost built out. Heinz has the only significant piece of land left to build out, and he's just about to break ground. Office rents, Class A office rents for the new product coming on the street, $70 a square foot gross. 4% vacancy. Second healthiest office market in the country after Midtown Manhattan, and after yesterday, it might become the most successful office market in the country. Urban entertainment concentration, lots of housing, major hotel concentration with a convention center, and a tremendous place to do business. Downtown adjacent, an example is DuPont Circle. This is where I live. This is the place 20 years ago. Was a very dangerous place. The gay community moved in, revived it like the gays have done throughout the country in many, many different locations. It's now achieving office market rents of $50 a square foot gross. Bethesda, mentioned it earlier, Bethesda, Maryland. This was a down and out suburban town center. The focal point, or the shot in the upper left-hand corner 10 years ago was a Bob's Big Boy Drive-In. It's now a twin tower achieving $45 to $50 per square foot rents gross. This is a suburban redevelopment in Arlington County, across the river from downtown DC. This was a declining strip mall and used car center 15 years ago. Today, there's about $10 billion of investment over the last 10, 15 years, and a major walkable urban place. And then a greenfield site, the Reston Town Center, out on the fringe. This is what something that Mobil Oil did 20 years ago. Everybody in real estate laughed at this thing, thinking that only Mobil Oil would have enough money to spill on this thing. This is achieving 60% price premiums over office, retail, rental apartment, and also retail. That's only a half mile away, but not walkable. You pay 50-60% more for the same product if you're in the walkable urban core. So, the bad news for this country, as far as this structural trend, we are structurally overbuilt in the fringe, and many of those products that we build out there, like my friend's suburban homes outside of San Francisco, will be bulldozed. There's no market for them. When you take a look at the housing price declines in this country, take in Atlanta, which didn't go up that much, so it's not been caught up in this. The housing prices over the last year in Atlanta have declined 7% on average. But in the downtown area, in the downtown adjacent areas, the housing prices have been flat. All of the decline has been out on the fringe, 14-15%. The worst number that I've seen so far in this country is Los Angeles, which over the last year has declined as far as the average resale price, has declined 23% in 1 year. But in West Los Angeles, it's been pretty much flat. 50-60 miles from downtown, in Palmdale and Victorville, the average price decline has been 43%. Never have we seen that kind of housing price collapse. There's a lot of houses out there that are worth less than their mortgages. That explains this financial crisis better than anything else. The subprime is just the down payment on what we're going to have to go through. So we have structurally overbuilt the wrong product in the wrong location. And by the way, the climate change legislation, which I'm actually working on back in D.C., along with the transportation legislation, is just going to raise the price of energy more, thus making walkable urban product that much more valuable. And the converse out on the fringe. The good news is that there's pent-up market demand for this stuff, for walkable urban product. If we can figure out how to develop it, and most of it will be anchored by rail transit. Americans don't like buses. We like rail transit. The other good news is that walkable urban infrastructure costs 1/5 to 1/10 the price on a per unit basis that drivable suburban product costs. There was a reason why that drivable suburban product had to be subsidized out of the general fund of our states and of the federal government, because it was too expensive otherwise. Walkable urban product is much less expensive to build on a price per unit basis. That includes lighting. And we've got to raise the bar on the transit that we put in this country. I was just in Malaga, Spain, speaking to the Spanish downtown group. 500,000 people live in Malaga, Spain. They are building a 24-mile-long, two-line subway. And we think that, oh my God, light rail is far too expensive, and we can only do bus rapid transit. Garbage. We've got to put in the rail transit. But the returns are tremendous. There's a project, or there's a piece of land that just closed 2 months ago in a former really lousy part of D.C. that 5 years ago was worth at best $10 a square foot. Very dangerous section. New rail station, overlay zoning district, $5 billion worth of primarily private investment, including Forest Cities investment. That land closed 2 months ago for $712 a square foot. That's the power of the pent-up demand for walkable urban development, sold to 2 developers in this lousy market. But we're just learning how to rebuild this. To me, and we're going to talk about this with the panel, that it's a 3-legged stool. We've got to have the private developers in place. We've got to have the public sector to set the table. But key is the management of the place. We've got to learn how to manage these places. It's primarily with business improvement districts. And we're just beginning to start as far as learning how to manage these places. There's a whole spectrum of things that we can do. It starts with thinking about it as a cost center, doing clean and safe in our walkable urban places. We get into event sponsorship, we get into retail, we get into managing the parking, redoing the parks, get into major infrastructure improvements, we get into catalytic development companies. We're beginning to see a tremendous expansion in what we learn and how we manage these places. And I was hoping that Rich Bradley, who runs the downtown DC BID, was here today. This is his slide. He was here yesterday. And he's talking about how these walkable urban places can become transformational, unique transformational places, but it takes phenomenal management. So what should we in the U.S. do next? Remember that transportation drives development. I'm involved in a thing called Transportation for America, which is a coalition that Urban Land's involved with. That partners include BOMA, and it includes a lot of real estate developers, such as Forest City, such as Cherokee Partners, that are trying to fundamentally reform transportation policy in this country. 2009 is the reauthorization of the Federal Transportation Bill. We, as the real estate industry, have to be at the table. That we need to represent and we need to demand a fundamental change in how we build the transportation system that will give us the development options to build walkable urban places. Because the system is broke, we're out of money, and broken, as bridge collapse has shown. That we need to plan these transportation systems at the metropolitan level. It's not a top-down sort of thing. It should be mode neutral. Right now, 80% of our transportation dollars go to car and truck-based transportation. We need to have it be mode neutral. No bias shown towards any one mode. We need to maintain the existing system because it's crumbling. We need a high rail, we need a national high-speed rail system. We're being lapped by China and Europe, especially now that our airline system is beginning to crumble, particularly for the short and midterm flights. And we need to get the private sector into the financing of this thing, because again, the government's a broke. So one of the things that we're suggesting is a TOD tax credit, similar to a low-income and or a historic tax credit, and an infrastructure bank for credit enhancement of transit-oriented development projects. So that's the future, folks. Take it and run. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your
Excuse me,
attention.
at this time, before we start with the questions and the discussion, take a 5-minute recess.
Okay. This was all the information.
Your proposal as far as how to proceed.
Thank you, Mayor. At this point, that ends the presentation of information with regard to really the national scene with regard to economics and the future of planning and real estate development. As there were questions, we thought we'd take some questions at this time, and then the second portion of our presentation today is Planning and Development's proposal for how we would move forward to position the city of Las Vegas to meet the new economy into the future. But we thought we'd take some questions at this time.
All right, this is what I'd like to do then, since it's a joint meeting. I'm going to call upon a council member to ask the first question, and then look towards the Planning Commission for the next question, and go back and forth that way, so everybody will have an opportunity to participate. Councilman Barlow.
Thank you, Mayor. This question is for Mr. Pacino. You mentioned during your opening comments Los Angeles County, and my question is, I have two questions for you. Why does Los Angeles have fewer jobs today than they did in 1980? You referenced something in that respect. And two, you referenced locations of housing, and I would like to know what are the locations of the housing type and the stock you were referring to as far as a description. Those would be my two questions.
Thank you, Councilman Barlow. First, with respect to the employment in the city of Los Angeles, we lost our manufacturing base, and Los Angeles, interestingly enough, was initially a manufacturing city, and most people don't think of it, but the tire industry, the automobile industry, the aerospace industries, I can go on. There's a litany of industries that in fact moved out of the city, and it moved because we moved into a global world. And we were competing against the world, and Los Angeles didn't deal with its cost structure. And it has high business tax, it has a high tax base, and it's now not competitive with the neighboring suburban cities. So even the entertainment industry in Los Angeles has moved to Culver City, Santa Monica. Universal Studios is in the county, and the city has really been struggling with its economic base. So the first caution I would give to any city, and that is really be cognizant of your cost structure, your tax base, your cost base, and as you move forward in restructuring, make sure that you do it on a return on investment strategy. I think that absolutely, I mean, we can talk about, Chris and I and others, we can talk about all of our planning ideas, but if the economic base isn't there, and you don't move policies and you don't move strategies that are fundamentally make dollars and cents, then long term you can't reposition yourself. And that's that. And furthermore, the cost of public services, the cost of your utilities. Where every public policy can make a difference, pay attention to the cost structure. And I know you do. I know the culture of the city is really focused on that, and I'm sure that you will. But that's the reason I would suggest for the economic base loss, and it's something we really need to work on within the city. I know the current mayor has game plans, and I mean I've told him that should be his number one priority, without exception. Now, with respect to the housing and the housing that you mentioned, what we're now finding is what Chris Lineberger talked about, where you build the correct policies so that you can have mixed use, you have activity centers, they're interesting places, it's walkable. We've developed tools such as the location-efficient mortgage. If housing's located next to transit, you can get breaks. You can get a certain number of basis points reduced on your mortgage, so that you can get that. You capture some of the transit benefits in your mortgage. All of the whole set of policies surrounding how you make the residential and the surrounding areas more financially attractive. I mean, it really does come down to how do you improve the return on investment. And here's one area that I kind of fault Chris and his presentation. Those increased values shouldn't just go to the developer and into the price on the marketplace. It ought to be a joint venture between not just bids, but it ought to be a joint venture between the municipality who establishes the policies. They work out the agreements with the private sector, and a part of that appreciation, in fact, goes to support the public services that are necessary to build communities. And to build the kind of economic base. But what really is on the table, in my estimation, is a new business deal for America, where we build housing units that people want to buy, given the demography of the market, particularly the future marketplace. Lineberger reinforced the work of, he gave some vivid examples of the more systemic paper that Dal Myers prepared, and I was trying to get a copy of it for my presentation today. I wasn't able to. Dal was on, it was spring break this past week, and so I didn't get it to you, but I will. But pay attention to that marketplace and to the demography, establish the policies, and policies that you direct. I mean, the interesting thing about what you're launching is that you can establish where you want to start. You can establish how you proceed through the policy, through your built environment policies. We haven't done that in the past. We really have gotten we got into a cookie cutter mold over the last 10 or 20 years, and we've just been doing, because it worked. People bought the product. It was profitable, and our cities grew. Well, we have a whole new set of constraints on our cities. We have a whole new marketplace. And what I always recommended to the cities that I served, and I served 186 cities, and that is you really do, because public policy leads the built environment, you're going to establish the parameters that make the marketplace profitable. So you saw it in examples that Tom showed on walkability. Well, I think if you can convert that same walkability index to a profitability index, to a return on investment index. I don't know, Councilman, I talked about a lot of things, but I don't know if I...
Yes, you touched it. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd like to address...
Thank you. If there's no one else, I do have a couple questions. One is, I don't challenge your data, of course, but I would question if your statement that in 20 years only 12% of the households are going to have children. I hope that's not the case in Las Vegas. We like to think of ourselves more of a family-oriented society, and maybe your references are more to urban D.C. or Manhattan or downtown Los Angeles. I don't know, but we need a place for our families to live. And so if we get involved in developing more intense density with work opportunities immediately accessible to those residences, so we can avoid the transportation issue, we're going to have a considerable need for urban parks. How would you suggest that all fit together in a community like Las Vegas?
Councilman, I didn't catch your last name, I'm sorry.
Trowbridge. And it's wannabe, it's not for real yet.
Councilman Trowbridge.
He is Commissioner hoping to become council.
Okay, Chair, fair enough. You asked one question on the 12% figure. That is a nationwide figure, and it's going to vary by area and city. And the Myers piece will, in fact, break it out for different parts of the country. But I think you'll be surprised at how low the number is, even for a city like Las Vegas. And we've looked at the same information for Southern California, and what we're finding is that there is a real change in the demographics that are leading to household formations. And the number we generally carry around in our head, and that is the majority of our new households are families. And that's historically been true, but it won't be true in the future. Chair Trowbridge. And I don't know what the number is, and I'm not even going to speculate, but I think it's going to be lower than what you think. And there's a whole bunch of reasons for that. I mean, it's not, some of it relates to age, and some of it relates to transformations that are occurring socially within our society. Now, having said that, it's putting the open spaces that are needed, are creating the open spaces, particularly as we retrofit the already developed portion of our cities and our metropolitan areas. Let's just be specific: the city of Las Vegas and the unincorporated area, putting together the necessary open space, putting together the capacity, the transit capacity, and then also putting together or allowing the kind of development activities along those critical patterns is really the task in front of you. And Margot might want to say more to that, because I think you have other parts of the program that are going to be addressing that. But I think you put your finger on the policy issues that you need to work on. And before I turn the microphone over to Margot, let me just say the area of transit and what are the technologies and what are the approaches that we use for transit is the area that I believe we have to work on the most. We can't keep doing the same technologies that we've done for the last 100 years into the next 100 years. We have got to allow, and my current research and work at USC is how do we procure new technologies that are innovative, that reduce costs, and not keep doing the same thing. And if you think about the way we procure transit, we take what we did in the past, put out a set of specs, put out to bid, people bid on it, and of course the costs don't go down. We need to be able to look at how we introduce innovation, technology, and that we do differently in the transit area. The costs in transit are going up far too fast. And that, to me, is the biggest cost issue. My response to Councilman Barlow was be aware of your cost structure and also be aware of the cost structure of the infrastructure we build. We have to reduce it. And I believe that we can by being creative and innovative.
If I may add to that, in your package of background material with regard to the transit issue, you have a letter that was signed by the mayor and sent to Jacob Snow at RTC with regard to the importance of transit. And I can report out that the Public Works Director, Mr. Cervantes, and myself met with Mr. Snow's staff on last Friday and had a long discussion as to the importance of the future of transit in this community. And we believe that we are headed in the right direction. And we have opened those lines of communication and are moving forward with great vigor. With regard to the parks, as you know, the recent update to the parks element identified those areas of the city with the largest amount of population and the duration of that population where neighborhood parks are necessary, and that's where we set our priorities. And with regard to the new neighborhoods we hope to create, that's a portion of that, and that's what we'll be talking about in the next section, is essentially where do we go from here in the city of Las Vegas.
May I ask a quick question?
Absolutely not. We're following Oscar's rules of order here. Would any member of the council like to be heard, or will we cede our time to Mr. Evans? Mr. Evans, go ahead.
Just a quick question for the mayor. In your letter, you ask the Director Snow about the possibility of some of the stimulus money used for light rail and new transportation systems. Is that something that is a possibility and that we've looked at?
I certainly hope so. Ms. Freville, are you able to address that? Because I can't put my arms around the stimulus monies yet. It's all too amorphous at this point in time. We've been briefed on it, but we're not getting any specifics. So perhaps Betsy is able to hone in on an answer to that question.
I can try and give a little bit of information based on what I've been told. One, there's a reauthorization bill that will be considered over the course of the next Congress, which usually provides the greatest opportunity for us to really reposition our priorities. In the presentation you heard earlier, there was a discussion about national transportation objectives to support transit-oriented design and make sure that there's funding that maybe shifts from just lane miles, if you will, to other sorts of transportation modes for competitiveness as far as federal funding goes. So I know that that's out there and that has a potential for us. One of the things that we found in preparing our master list that we presented to the U.S. Conference of Mayors for the city as the stimulus bill was being considered before it was adopted, one of the things that we found is that we didn't have shovel-ready transit projects ready to go for commuter rail, light rail, any of the such. We don't even have the right-of-way assembled to be able to make this work. So I would say that there may be some transit monies that would come to us probably for things that we've already been investing in, buses, right-of-way for the ACE or any of the other kind of more the newer bus types of systems. But as far as putting in new lines that would become commuter rails that really would get to what we're talking about here today, I don't hold out great hope for that in the stimulus bill because we're not shovel ready on any of them. It doesn't mean that we can't get there, but I don't think we are. Tom, correct me if I'm wrong. I may not know of some things you guys have been working on.
No, that's exactly right, and that was the entire point of the mayor's letter, was to begin preparation so that the next opportunity isn't missed by us in this community, so that when the money becomes available again in the next package, we are prepared to be able to take advantage of those funding opportunities.
Thank you.
If I might just add an observation. You saw on Chris Leinberger's slide the notion of transit-oriented districts, infrastructure banks, leveraging private capital and tax credits. And given the massive investment that we're going to need within the country, and given the federal fiscal position that we're in, I don't believe we're going to see massive public monies going into infrastructure to the level that we need. And the question that we have been struggling, I'm co-director of an effort called America 2050. And it's a national effort. Speaker Pelosi has made it one of her initiatives. Earl Blumenauer, a congressman from Oregon, has really been championing it, and we're going to be attempting to recruit the Senate pro tem leader to help us on this. But the fundamental thesis that we're working on, and that is, how can we take the growth and development that is occurring, and how can we capture, as I said earlier, how can we capture a portion of that increased valuation to help, I didn't say fully, but help support the infrastructure that we're putting in? How can we reduce the cost of infrastructure so that we can, in fact, make these financially more viable? Let me be very specific. If you had transit lines and you had stations, there's no reason that either TIF districts or BID districts, that these are tax increment finance districts, could not be established that could, in fact, capture a portion of that increased depreciation. We know how to calculate it now. I mentioned the tools. Those tools are available to you and to the city. So the question becomes, how do we not just wait on Washington to provide the resources, and we need some, but how do we start building business plans that in fact make these business investments? This real estate will be more valuable. It's a joint venture between public and private. So how can, in fact, there be a business plan approach, and then take that to Washington so that we can use local dollars to truly then leverage federal dollars? But I don't believe we can just wait on federal dollars to enable us to do this restructuring.
Thank you. Councilor Ross.
Thank you, Your Honor. You know, I believe in this, and I'm I'm a buyer into this concept, but this is the same thing I heard 4 years ago, Director, when I was first elected. The great urbanization, the work, the live, the play in one neighborhood, and I bought it. And a lot of people did out there because a lot of projects that came out to Ward 6 were those projects. Not one's been built. And that's good. I'm still a buyer into the product here. I still believe in this because I see it work in other cities and with great success. I have yet to see it happen in Las Vegas. And you can help me with that, and I know you will. I see that in all this conversation about this urbanization that behaviors have to change. The consumer wants to buy the product. And it's tough for me to do that because I don't see a lot of consumer-driven, gee, I want this kind of home, this is where I want to live, because I don't want to drive my car, I want to take that mass transportation, I want to get on that bus or that light rail or that ACE BRT system. I don't see that here in Southern Nevada. I don't see it at all. I'm a firm believer that the market is going to dictate what's necessary to build. Now we're looking at different economic conditions. Lending is a challenge out there, of course, but I'm a firm believer in the market's going to dictate. I remember a couple of years ago, Councilman Wilson was talking about a moratorium on conversions from apartments to condominiums, and there was great discussion and debate about it, and I felt the same way. The market's going to dictate here. The walkable urban environment, we're missing one element in here, I think, and that's the employment centers. People have to be able to work there, to live there, so they can park their car and walk to work. We're not like Atlanta or Boston or even Denver, I don't think, because I haven't seen the product in Denver yet, and I'm looking forward to seeing that. I have one challenge with the gentleman who gave the presentation. He states, we have built the wrong product in the wrong location. I don't agree with that. I believe we built the product that people were prepared to buy in the location that was good at the time. Before this housing market crashed, developers and builders built products that were selling, or they wouldn't have built them to make a dollar. So I have a hard time with that statement. And I recognize what you said, sir, about we're the policymakers. Absolutely. And we can put all this policy into our master plan for what we believe as policymakers this city should have. But it has to be a buy-in by everybody. The public, the consumer, the working men and women, they have to buy into that product. I've been to D.C. I've seen it. It works. I've seen the pictures that were shown. Great transformation in the past 20 years. I'm having a hard time, as a native Nevadan, lifelong resident of this city, I'm having a hard time seeing this happening here. Thank you, Your Honor.
Mr. Pisano?
If I might, Mr. Mayor, just respond to, or share an observation, not respond, Councilman Ross. And that is, we did build what the market wanted. And I said we've been very successful at doing that. And it's been very profitable for a lot of people, and our cities have grown. But now they need to grow in a different way. And there will be a different market. And the question, and this was the challenge that I put to my elected officials, will you allow the market to work? Let me just say that the growth vision that we adopted was pushed by the building industry. And the greatest resistors were the elected officials, because they were protecting the traditional R1 neighborhood, and they found it very difficult politically to start approving and developing a different product. And it was a dynamic tension, and we're still going through it within Southern California, and I believe we're going through it in the country, and you will go through it. And that is, how do you build the partnership between the neighborhood groups, the private community, and yourselves, so that you can collectively move forward, so we can build a new future. And it won't be easy. I mean, it politically is not easy to do what we're talking about, and just as it's been difficult financially to do it. The rules are going to be in place. In the past, many of the financial institutions resisted this form of development because they thought it was more risky. The insurance companies wouldn't underwrite them, etc. That's going to change in the future. But my only observation to you in that is it has to start with projects, and it has to start with it starts on the street in individual communities where you have a vision and you start building projects that achieve that vision, and that it's not easy to do. I think it's going to be easier in the future because the market's going to be there driving it. And by the way, the home builders, they will tell you that they want to build what they're comfortable doing, but they also know, particularly the large ones, the Lennars, the KBs, etc. They're getting ready for the Lewises. I mean, I could list all of our Southern California builders, and I'm sure they're here, that can and are going to be willing to partner with you.
And if I may, Your Honor, I can't wait to see that. Because I can't wait to see that. I'm looking forward to that. Because I'm buying into this concept. But still, if the lending markets weren't the way they are today, single-family homes would still be selling here in Las Vegas, still be selling here in Southern Nevada, and we wouldn't have a surplus. I'm telling you right now, that's what I firmly believe. So if the home builders are positioning themselves to start with going with this product, I'm looking forward to that because I want to see it work. Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you. I have a couple of questions. You talk about and I believe in transit-oriented development. I think it is incredibly possible that we could have some great urban nodes that do wonderful things in our community here. But there's a fundamental gap in doing transit-oriented development. Transit-oriented development means people can ride buses, trains, and such. They're not going to be in their cars. So if they're not in their cars, they're not paying gas taxes. So who's going to make up this? Is in a city like Las Vegas, how do we cover the gap from where we are today to a transit-oriented development when all of our transportation funding comes through gas tax, federal gas tax, state tax? I mean, that's a big question. I mean, I think we'd have wonderful electric cars right now, but nobody can figure out how to make any money off it, tax-wise.
First of all,
the other thing is, if we're going to have transit-oriented developments or these urban nodes or the villages like Councilman Ross, we've approved, we're hungry for them. There are some fundamental changes that I think we could make as a community, as a policy. We make streets an incredible width because we need trash trucks to turn around in their cul-de-sacs and fire engines. Other communities in this country have smaller trash trucks, smaller fire engines, and hence you would save some of our infrastructure, which I think the home builders would buy into because they get 1 or 2 more units per acre. And we don't change the fabric of what our city is. So those are a couple of things I think. One is a funding gap that I do have a concern about. And the other is, how do you see these other things happening? Is that these smaller vehicles happening in Southern California and making those systems work?
First of all, on the funding situation, if we rely on the gas tax, and remember, the gas tax is a user tax to pay for roads that automobiles use, and there's been a lot of tension within the transportation community. I mean, I lobbied 4 successive reauthorizations, and I ran into this tension, and that is, don't take the money that we're paying for infrastructure that we're going to use, don't take that and go off and build something else. And you stated that gas tax is going to go down. It's going to go down for a whole number of reasons, mainly cost and environmental. So if we rely on the gas tax as the funding source, then we're not going to get from here to there. But you said, but at the core, the investment there should be a nexus between users and benefiters, the people who ride transit, and secondly, the real estate that surrounds the stations. There is going to be a benefit there. And some of those slides pointed it out. There's money that can be captured to pay, and that could either be through the fares on the facilities, or it could in fact be on some form of nexus between the real estate and the appreciation and the revenues that are needed to pay for the facility. That's a business set of relationships. And when you go through the numbers, and I can tell you, in fact, I have other slides where I can show we in fact put a transit line. We changed the FARs, the floor area ratios. We allowed for different densities. We had different setback requirements, all the things that you deal with in the Planning Commission. We translated that into dollars and cents on what's the increased value of that particular real estate. And I can show you that the numbers are not small. They're very large. And then the question is, who shares what? You got to, I mean, the developer will not go in there if there's not a profit. And at the same time, if you're smart about the arrangements and the negotiations, you will capture a portion of that to pay toward it. Thirdly, there are benefits to the motoring public. If you get congestion off the road, then those that do pay gas taxes have less congestion. So yeah, there's a percentage that you can legitimately, in a well thought out way, put the financial deal together. Do these things pencil out? You bet. And the smarter you get, and the sharper your pencils, and the more creative you get, the more they're going to pencil out. So I'm convinced we can get the revenue streams. I'm also convinced that the federal government and our states are going to have to help bootstrap to get this all started. With respect to the last set of issues that you raised, you can't look at this as just one activity. You have to look how in fact, you put all of the needed services on that roadway. I'm going to argue that wide roadways give you the capacity to use that roadway in a lot of different ways, and not just bus transit, but you can take a part of that right of way, and you can put grade separated. There's a lot of different options for how you use that right of way more creatively. We don't have to just have narrow European streets. And we're not planning that in Los Angeles, in our cities. I think we have the same design codes that you do.
Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem.
Yes. Gary Reese, Mr. Pisani, staff. Just a couple comments, and then maybe a question. You know, we see all these big developments in bigger cities. And I've said, since I've been on the council, that we have a very unique situation here. We talk about redevelopment. Our area that we redevelop is very, very, very small. Yes. We don't have a city like San Diego or Los Angeles or San Francisco or Washington, D.C. or Baltimore. It's really unique to me. Now, through the leadership of our mayor, we worked very hard, very closely with some developers out of California. We built the Streamline Towers, we built the Jewel, we built Soho Lofts. We built a little place called La Octane. We got another, it's a little square building that's got just 400 rooms that are, single-family occupants. It's full. La Octane is full. But the Streamline, the Jewel, and Newport are all empty. Well, I shouldn't say all empty. They're basically less than 30% occupied. The cost was tremendous. We was in that time when the builders couldn't build, affordable. We had condominiums being sold at, to me, an outlandish price. We built something that, to me, and I said it at the time, wasn't affordable for the people that we needed to look at. Now, because of what we've done as a council and as a planning commission, we've created World Market Center. We got the Ruvo Institute opening up. We have the Chelsea Outlet Mall. We have the Performing Arts Center that's going to have people working downtown. We're going to have employees there. We're creating a place where we got people that can afford to maybe buy or rent, okay? So I can see maybe a need for something like this downtown, but you have to have the people to move in and use it. We created the entertainment district downtown. We have people coming there that maybe now they're seeing, well, maybe we'd like to live down here because this is maybe becoming a part-time big city. And my thing is we was way out in front of the curve, to me, on the trying to get a housing force downtown. I met with the gentleman this morning that wants to build 2 affordable type, 4-story. The property's been zoned for high-rise condominiums, but they want to come in and build maybe a 4-story affordable apartment rentals, a small unit, maybe 600, 700, 800 square feet for $700 to $900 a month rental. Now this will, to me, target that need that we may have downtown. But right now, our downtown area, even the dealers on Fremont Street, they haven't shown any interest to live downtown. It's not that much of a commute. It's not that hard to get downtown. I mean, it takes them a little while, but it's not like traveling from El Centro or even Escondido into San Diego, or even from Riverside into Los Angeles. So there was a need, and there is a need in those bigger cities. Here, we have to start yesterday, as far as, to me, having our rapid transit. My question is, through this presentation today, what do you see here in Las Vegas with the need that we have? Are we ahead of the curve again, or are we behind, or are we doing those things that is necessary?
I'm going to be brief because Margot said you need to move on. Be wary of experts from out of town.
That's a definition of an expert.
That is the definition of it. That's correct, Mayor. You're where you should be. You see a problem and you're going to solve. You need to move forward and solve it. And that is okay. You tried high-rise residential in downtown. Let me tell you, anytime you build Class 1 type buildings, you're going to have Class 1 type rents and costs. If you saw the photographs that I showed you of all these buildings in Orange County, you didn't see anything over 4.5 or 5 stories for a reason, and that is you need to build a product for your marketplace. Can you mix low-rise and make it dense? Absolutely. Even amidst high-rise and with the right design, you'll enhance the character of your downtown. Do you need other centers that are adjacent to downtown? Yes, but you've got to start somewhere, and the mayor and I had a discussion before this session. You lay out the vision of where you want to start, and you probably need ultimately to do both. Can you have more less dense development downtown that pencils out? Yeah. And can it mesh in with the cost of real estate and the value of real estate in your downtown? You'll sort those economics out.
Thank you.
If I may, the question came up, you've heard it all before, or this is the same thing we told you in 2007. And the purpose of what we just showed you, the presentations that Tom gave you on the statistics comparing the early 2000s to now, the presentation of Mr. Pisano with regard to his work, and also the Lineberger video. The point was to say that economics have changed. The world is different than the last time we had a presentation here in 2007. And our point today is not to say what type of development that we want this Planning Commission and this Council to force upon the community, but how can we position ourselves as a city? What policies do we need to put into place so that we will be ready to meet the new economics that we've seen, the changes in the demographics, the changes in energy costs, and the changes in the market. It is not to purport one type of development, but the whole point of what we want to talk about today, and the 5 different levels of development that Mr. Lineberger talked about, is there's different kinds of development for different markets. And we believe that the city needs to position itself so that we can accommodate these different types of neighborhoods throughout the city, so that there's a lifestyle and a housing and a working and a recreating choice for all of our citizens that are going to come here. And we want to be able to present you with the information so that you can make the decisions, so that we can be in a position to accommodate the markets as they come forward in the future, and that's what the next part of our presentation is to give you a taste of some ideas of what could occur throughout the city, and then we would hope to take your comments again. Also, we have the benefit of Mr. Snow being here also, and so he'll be available to listen to this portion of the study and hopefully answer questions for you after this part of the presentation.
Your Honor, quick question or comment to the Director. Director, I think that's a great idea, but can we include the industry in those discussions? And
of course. This is the start, not the finish.
You follow?
Yes, sir.
I mean, let's include those builders. Let's include those developers out there who have a vested interest in this, who right now are dealing with the financial losses that they're...
This is some ideas to start.
Thank you.
Mayor, does that work? We can go on to the next?
Yes, certainly.
Thank you.
We've just solved all the problems of the world.
Okay, well, good, and you'll let us know.
Well, I think we have to be pragmatists when we're having this discussion, and without consolidation, you're going to have terrific difficulties in mass transit. Mr. Snow will remember the discussion that we had with the RTC and the Blue Ribbon panel from Henderson. They all voted against mass transit. So I'm thinking to myself, won't this be interesting? We'll have all this mass transit stopping at Sahara. I mean, there's real practical issues, and all of the benefits that we want to give these developers, the bids and the TIFs, that may go poof in the next 2 months up in Carson City, because that's the first thing that they're looking to take away as far as incentives. So we got to be practical about this. It's wonderful to theorize, but the bottom line is we don't want to create impossible conditions. We want to make this a better place, but we have to do it within our parameters.
Absolutely, sir, and it's about accommodating and facilitating, not forcing. And with that, Flynn will give a presentation now on where we think there are ideas that can be pursued for the future.
Mr. Mayor, you're moving to something else. Could I just make a comment before you do?
Certainly.
I wanted to say that I was very fortunate to attend a 3-day conference at USC recently about suburban renewal, and also spending many hours visiting the outlying areas of Los Angeles, such as Pasadena, Redondo Beach, who have had urban renewal. I learned a lot. I want to thank you all for expanding my knowledge today even further. I firmly believe this type of urban renewal is possible with great benefits. The key, I feel, is management. I think someone mentioned here on one of the slides or something, or the video, that how we develop and manage these projects is key. It's not just about putting money together, it's about having the knowledge and the passion for such mixing and knowing how to appropriately put it together, as I saw in those suburbs. I think everybody on this council knows that I've been one of the most vocal in protecting neighborhood integrity, and I stand strongly to protect neighborhoods that are in my ward that have existed for decades. But what I saw as I visited these outlying communities was a mixture of such that you could still keep your neighborhood community and add this to it. I don't know if you called it a nub or whatever it was you called it, but node, sorry. But I really think this can be done. And I feel also that it isn't just about putting the money together, it's about having that knowledge. And that's why I feel it's so important that we have people in planning and development that are leading us into this now, because I know this can be done. I think it should be offered. And my question, if I could just ask, is my understanding from USC's, the days I spent there, was that we can mix this. We can put this next to existing residential areas, maybe those, and have buffer landscaping so that it's not impeding upon the neighborhoods. That's my question.
And the answer is yes. Okay. Margot shakes her head and says yes.
Okay. Because I think that's very important. And I also think that as we go along talking about this, we're going to find more and more people interested. I think another key to this is disseminating the information early on so that we have an understanding within the community of what we're talking about. And they don't think we're just going to build big skyscrapers, but what we're going to do is add to our trails. And I can see where I will be adding new walking areas from that Safe Routes from School that'll go all the way from Alta to Sahara. And I can see where along that line we can have some of this that would connect those R1 areas with this type of urban situation, and I think they would like that. I wanted to just mention that today. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councilwoman, you've essentially given my presentation for me, so thank you. I appreciate that.
Wow, I'm improving.
I'm going to change the title of my presentation from Great Streets and Great Neighborhoods, based on your recent spate of questions, to positioning ourselves within our parameters. So that's what I'm going to speak to you about today. Actually, I'm going to start off, and I am going to talk about great streets and great neighborhoods. The American Planning Association in 2007 established a new program where they confer awards to great streets and great neighborhoods across the country. Some examples of those, the qualities of some of the great neighborhoods as they list it, is that great neighborhoods have access to the needs of daily life, they have architectural interest, and that they provide the ability to walk and for humans to interact, among other things. And some examples of great neighborhoods include Society Hill in Philadelphia, the Hillcrest neighborhood in San Diego, and the village of Mariemont in Ohio. Also, in terms of the qualities of great streets, the APA defines them as such, that the great streets connect to a larger network, that they balance activities of driving, walking, cycling, parking, that they have exemplary urban design, that they have streetscape, and that they promote safety for pedestrians and for vehicles, and that they have a memorable character. Some examples of the award winners from the past couple of years include Ocean Drive in Miami Beach, South Broad Street in Philadelphia, and Mayor, you'll notice that there's two examples from Philadelphia. North Michigan Avenue in Chicago, South Temple Street in Salt Lake City, or Mill Avenue in Tempe, Arizona. The question is, why are great streets and great neighborhoods important? The answer is, world-class cities not only have professional sports teams, but they also have memorable streets and neighborhoods. So if you think about the places that you like to visit, for example, I like to go to New York City, there's great museums, but not only are there great things to go see, wandering through the neighborhoods and seeing the character of the streets and the neighborhoods is part of what makes that experience a wonderful place to be. Why do we need to have great streets and neighborhoods? Well, our 2020 master plan mandates it through the goals, policies, and objectives. It talks about the qualities of our neighborhoods and the qualities of our streets. Not only that, our strategic plan also talks about having livable neighborhoods and sustainable neighborhoods. So certainly, this is something that we should focus on. But more importantly, improved streets and improved neighborhoods equal improved quality of life for our residents. And that's really why you are doing what you are doing today, why you serve in the position that you do, is because you're about the quality of life for our residents. And I think we're all working towards that. Question is, how do we get great neighborhoods? What makes a great neighborhood? Think about why you bought your house where you did. And I'm going to pose that question to two people. Plants in the audience. Margot?
Yes, Glenn. Why did I select my neighborhood?
Why did you select your?
Because of its proximity to downtown, because it had a great character. It wasn't just every home looked exactly alike. It's a great place to walk my dog, and the mayor lives there.
I think that's a great character you were talking about.
And then I'm going to ask Tom to come up and talk about why he bought where he did.
Well, I chose my neighborhood primarily because of its proximity to Red Rock National Conservation Area. That's where me and my family spend a lot of our time riding our bikes and hiking. It also had wonderful streetscapes, opportunities for my children. They walk to school, they walk to the park, they hang out with their kids in the neighborhood. So that's primarily the reasons I bought where I did.
Mayor Goodman, please. Tom, where do you live?
I live in your ward, Councilman.
Distant from the mayor.
Wait a minute. And where does Margot live?
I live in Ward 1.
Thank you. Ward 1, thank you.
The point is that people buy where they do for different reasons, but it's usually some combination of proximity to things. I should tell you that I was going to ask Doug to come up and answer this question, but actually his response would be proximity away from things. But sometimes that determines where people live too. But also it's a combination of design and aesthetics. What is the appeal of the neighborhood? What does it look like? But more importantly, will the neighborhood have lasting value? And that means lasting value even if you're a first-time buyer, you're hoping that you'll be able to trade up at some point in time, so you're hoping that your home will appreciate in value, or if you're further along in life and it's part of your retirement plan. Ultimately, all of us want to live in a neighborhood that has lasting value. Now, a couple of us from the planning department went on a little tour last summer in looking at the way other cities are doing things, and we stumbled upon a neighborhood in Pasadena that's called Bungalow Heaven. And if you look at the map, and unfortunately this isn't a very good example, you'll see it's basically, let's see, is the pointer going to work here? It's basically just a square is all it is. It's a neighborhood that's bounded on four sides by major arterial streets. On one of the arterial streets, Lake Avenue, you've got commercial here, and it's primarily neighborhood serving commercial. It's not your big box stores, but rather it's like your drugstore, your hardware store, some local restaurants, things of that nature, the dry cleaner. And then you've also got commercial up there on Washington as well. And then the other arterials are primarily residential in nature, but they are major arterial roads that move traffic. Another thing that you'll notice about this neighborhood, if you could see the slide a little bit better, is that there's a park directly in the center of the neighborhood. And that's one of the things that makes it such a special place, is that people who live here in Bungalow Heaven are no more than a 5-minute walk from the needs of daily life, from being able to run to the grocery store, the dry cleaner, what have you, and they're no more than a 5-minute walk from a neighborhood park. And so that's one of the reasons why this neighborhood has lasting value, is because it's convenient for residents to live there. Now, looking at the history of development of this neighborhood, it was built between 1905 and 1930. A lot of the homes are craftsman-style homes. Some of them are from the Sears kit homes that you could buy through the mail. And so the homes are pretty small. They're between 800 and 1,200 square feet, so they're not palaces by any means. And the lots that they sit on are approximately 6,500 square feet, which is generous by today's standards, but back then that was pretty modest. But one of the things that is of lasting value about this neighborhood is that even though the houses are small, they sit on the type of lot where they can be expanded. So as the family grew, the house could grow with it. There was enough room in the backyard or the side yards that they could build onto the house. If you look at the actual character of the neighborhood, again, this isn't fancy. There's no cul-de-sacs, there's no curving streets or anything like that. But if you look at the streets themselves, they have these wonderful street trees that help to provide shade for the streets and provide character for the neighborhood. They have detached sidewalks with a landscape strip in between the street and the sidewalk. The houses themselves, again, they're pretty modest, but they have wonderful architectural details that we don't really see very often today. And so those are some of the characteristics that really make it a neighborhood of lasting value. And that's one of the reasons why we kind of stopped and stumbled upon it, is because it had such a great character while you were there. And so the question is, are we building neighborhoods of lasting value in Las Vegas? Is the housing product that we're building today going to mature, and is it going to have the character that's still going to be desirable 50, 60, 70 years down the road? And so that's the question we need to ask ourselves about great neighborhoods and neighborhoods of Las Vegas. Now, as we've already talked about from the presentation of Christopher Lineberger, there are basically two development types that he talked about, one being walkable urban and the second being drivable suburban. And we've already talked about market conditions, how the current situation and changes in demographics are going to change the way that we provide development. Las Vegas has an adequate supply of drivable suburban, but do we have enough of walkable urban? Now, the question has already come up. Not everyone wants to live downtown, and we understand that. Not everyone is going to want to live in an urban core, but does that mean that they don't deserve the convenience of being able to walk to a park or to the store or to what have you? We answer this question by looking at different types of walkable neighborhoods. And again, Mr. Lineberger outlined 5 different types of walkable neighborhoods. Number 1 is what we usually think of, and that's the traditional downtown area. Secondly is downtown adjacent, and an example of that in Las Vegas would be like the Medical District or the historic West Side. Those are right close to downtown, and they still have that character that's relatively urban in nature. The third type that he talked about was a suburban town center, and the closest example of that we have is in the Centennial Hills area, what we intended the town center area to be. The fourth is suburban redevelopment. We don't really have an example of that here in Las Vegas right now, but typically a suburban redevelopment project would be, for example, an enclosed regional mall that is redeveloped as some type of a mixed-use development where they input streets, put a mixture of uses, and things like that. The fifth type is a suburban greenfield development, which is what we had envisioned for Kyle Canyon, that it too would also have a walkable center. So you can see that when we talk about walkable urban, we're really expanding that to be walkable suburban as well. It's not just the town that needs to be walkable, but there are areas throughout the city that can be walkable. What makes a neighborhood walkable? It's a combination of basically 2 things. Number 1, you have to have pedestrian facilities. That's the basics. You need to have sidewalks. Here in Las Vegas, it's absolutely crucial that you have shade. And then thirdly, as a pedestrian, you have to feel safe. Being able to cross the street, that you're not going to be hit by a car, or also that there's adequate lighting, so if you're walking at night, that you feel safe. The second thing that you need is amenities, and that can be things such as a grocery store, restaurants, drugstores, schools, parks, the library, those types of things. And so you need both of those to really make a neighborhood walkable. We've mentioned this website to you a couple of times in the presentation today. There's a website at www.walkscore.com, and I hope all of you have a chance to go visit that website and play around with it a little bit. But what it does is it basically ranks neighborhoods or rates neighborhoods based on their walkability by being able to have the needs of daily life in walking distance of houses. And so a score of 100 is the most walkable, a score of 0 is the least walkable. Now, one of the first things I did when I discovered this website is I clicked in on places that I had lived in my life to see what their walk score was. A little bit of history about me. I grew up on a farm in Oregon, and I keyed the address into the website there, and it gave it a walk score of 3. And actually, that was being a little bit generous because the only place that you could walk to from my house was to the other side of the road, and that was about it. Much later in my life, I moved to Miami Beach while I was going to grad school at the University of Miami. And coming from cold, cloudy, rainy Oregon, I knew that I wanted to live right close to the beach. And so I was able to get an apartment that was 3 blocks from the beach, clicked in the walk score there, and that has a walk score of 97, a much different environment. Let me tell you a little about the difference in the two. Growing up on a farm was a wonderful experience for me because I learned a lot of really important things like how to shovel cow manure out of the barn and how to plow a straight furrow. You know, those are all wonderful skills. However, because it wasn't a walkable place, I had to depend on my parents to drive me. And so that wasn't really going to happen very often. I missed out on a lot of the activities that many other people who grew up in more walkable places had, such as I was never able to participate in Little League because there wasn't one close enough that my parents could drive me to or that I could walk to. Never able to take swimming lessons. The list goes on and on. There were a lot of things I couldn't do in a non-walkable neighborhood because, again, there was just no way for me to get there. Now, conversely, when I lived in Miami Beach, I discovered one of the most important ways that you can rate a neighborhood is the ability to get Ben & Jerry's ice cream at 3 a.m. in the morning. And in Miami Beach, you can do that. In Hubbard, Oregon, you just can't. When I lived in Miami Beach, I discovered that even though I had to drive into town for classes, that when I got back to the beach, I could park my car and I never had to get in it again. I was able to walk to work. I had a part-time job at an architecture office that was just right across the park from where I lived. And so I could walk to work If I ever ran out of eggs or butter or milk or anything like that, I could just go down to Washington Avenue. It was easy to walk there. I could walk to church. I could walk to the beach. I could walk to the gym. There was no need for me to have a car once I was in Miami Beach. And so again, it's a very different experience, and my life became much more convenient by it. Looking at members of our planning department and where they live now and their walk scores, I'm just going to go ahead and put these out here. Courtney Mooney, our historic preservation officer, lives in the John S. Park neighborhood. Her neighborhood has a walk score of 80, and I'm presuming that's because she lives right around the corner from Lovett Frozen Custard. Margot lives in Park Circle, and she has a walk score of 75. Pretty good score there. Doug, despite the fact that he doesn't want to be near anyone, has a walk score of 60. There are some things that he can walk to, and he does have people around him now, unfortunately. And then Tom, way out in Summerlin, gets a walk score of 6. Now, one of the things that you have to understand about this website is that it takes into account amenities, but it doesn't take into account pedestrian facilities. Now, Tom's neighborhood has wonderful sidewalks and trails and access to natural areas, so that's one of the fallacies of this website, is it's not going to tell you those types of things. And Tom and I make fun of each other for where we live, and I'll get into that a little bit more as we go on. My own neighborhood has a walk score of 65. I live just south of Sahara Avenue in the Las Vegas Country Club. And as we talk about where people live and why they pick to live where they live, and there was a question earlier about the market, I was looking for a place that was within a mile radius of the Development Services Center. And in 2003, when I bought my house, there wasn't Jewel, there wasn't Streamline, there wasn't anything. And so here there was a demand, but there was no supply for me. And so I came to the next best thing, which is I found a townhouse, which was 2 miles from work, and it was relatively convenient to a number of different things, which I'll go into. One of the reasons why I bought where I did was because the gym is just down the street from me. I've got my bank, which is kind of across the way from me in Commercial Center. I've got restaurants like Lotus of Siam, which is a nationally ranked restaurant. And then I've also got a grocery store right there. All within a half mile of where I live, I have all of these things that I need on a day-to-day basis. However, when you look at the pedestrian facilities, we're rather lacking. If these slides were any better, we could play Where's Waldo with these, because there's a pedestrian in every one of those pictures. It's just a little hard to make out. On one side of the street, there is no sidewalk, there's just trees, and yet still people try to walk there in the gravel along the side of the street. On the other side of the street, you see the telephone poles that are planted right in the middle of the sidewalk. And then to get to the grocery store, you kind of have to cut through the Commercial Center parking lot and down the alley. So in no case do I really have any desirable pedestrian facilities. So I don't really walk to things even though they're very close, just because the experience isn't a great experience. It's difficult for me to do so. Now, if you look at me and my neighbors, there's 72 people, 72 houses along my street. And considering the fact that all of us are within a half mile of all of these services, if we were able to cut our trips by vehicle in half, that would reduce our congestion on our street. There would be 344 fewer vehicles on our street if we were able to cut our trips in half by walking instead of driving. So this is where the idea of a walkable neighborhood contributes to sustainability. Is number one, it cuts down on emissions, it cuts down on vehicle miles traveled, but there's some other things that it does as well. There's the reduced cost of having to maintain perhaps a second vehicle for some households if they can walk to things. There's financial savings with, the price of gas. It's gone down, but it's probably going to go up again. But also there's the improved health of residents. I was just at the Regional Planning Coalition meeting last week with Deb Williams from the Southern Nevada Health District, and she was talking about the fact that our communities are designed in such a way that adults and children don't get the exercise they need because, again, most of our neighborhoods are drivable rather than walkable. And so that's one of the things that we need to think about in terms of being able to walk to things. The question is, how do we start? How do we make our neighborhoods walkable? And this is really a two-part question because we anticipate that we will continue to build new neighborhoods in the future. And then also we have existing neighborhoods like mine that could become more walkable with just a few small fixes. In terms of the new neighborhoods, we adopted in 2005 a new land use category called traditional neighborhood development. And what that land use category requires is pedestrian-oriented neighborhoods with a balanced mixture of housing and commercial and civic amenities and the uses of daily living in proximity of dwellings. In addition, we've mentioned this to the Planning Commission in our workshop last year, that the Planning Department is working on revising Title 19, our zoning code, and we're working on what's called a form-based code, where we're trying to create a predictable public realm through an emphasis on physical form, or how structures relate to the lot and to the street. And this is one of the things that we can work on in terms of creating walkable neighborhoods, is including standards in the new zoning code that address that. Now, if we look at the existing neighborhoods that we have today, they're a result of the code that we have in place. So if there is something wrong there, then we do need to look at that and we need to fix it. In terms of existing neighborhoods, this is where we still have great opportunities. What we need to do is look at neighborhoods that have what I'll call good bones. Okay? They already have some of the existing amenities or facilities, but maybe they just need a little enhancement. The map that you see before you today, the red areas are areas where there's a concentration of both commercial and residential within walking distance. And you'll see those areas are spread throughout the city. And so what we would like to do is to focus on those areas and develop what we're calling walkable community plans, where we will take a neighborhood that already has some of those good bones, some of that good structure to it, and we'll look at what the needed improvements are, and then develop an implementation plan and schedule implementation as part of our capital improvement process. And so what we'll do is we'll designate an area, typically a half mile is about appropriate for looking for things within walking distance. Look at the pedestrian facilities. Do we need to improve the sidewalk network? Do we need to add street trees for shade so people can walk comfortably? Do we need to do enhancements to the crosswalks, things like that? Are there any amenities? For example, we have in our parks element areas that are underserved by parks. Maybe we need to add parks to the neighborhood. So those are things that we can look at as part of our walkable community plan. Just to give you an example of what this might mean, we start off with an existing neighborhood. The city will come in, we'll look at improvements that need to be made in terms of adding wider sidewalks, street trees, and then allow private development to follow that. Another example here, again looking at existing conditions, making improvements to the sidewalk, to the streetscape, and then letting the private development follow that. Again, looking at great streets, great neighborhoods, what are the world-class streets of Las Vegas? Las Vegas Boulevard is a scenic byway, and certainly that's one of our great streets, but what about the rest of the city? Are we falling short elsewhere in our city? Question is, why do great streets matter? The quality of streets is how people form an impression of what Las Vegas is all about. Sadly, as our parents told us we shouldn't judge a book by a cover, unfortunately many people do. And so they make a judgment about our city based on the character of our streets and our neighborhoods. Let me give you an example. Here on Santa Monica Boulevard in Los Angeles, and specifically on the area in the dividing line right between the city of Los Angeles and the city of West Hollywood. And I pulled these pictures off of Google Maps, which is why they're not that great. But again, it shows you the conditions of the street right now. Santa Monica Boulevard is a major east-west arterial within the region, carries a lot of traffic. On the Los Angeles side, which is over on the left-hand side of the screen, you can see that they've got overhead utilities. It has a very gritty appearance, if you will. Just one block away, on the other side of La Brea Boulevard, is the city of West Hollywood. And back in about 1998 or 99, the city of West Hollywood decided that they wanted to give the street a better character. And so working within the existing right-of-way, and it's a rather constrained right-of-way at that, it's only about 80 feet if I remember correctly, what they did is they narrowed the lanes just a little bit, they pushed out the sidewalks, they added street trees, they added pedestrian lights, they added benches, and so they improved the environment. What did this mean for them is in 2004, I believe, a major big box center decided to locate not on the Los Angeles side, but rather on the West Hollywood side, where the improvements had been made. And if you know anything about the financial structure of municipal governments in California, they depend heavily on retail sales tax. And so this was quite a coup for the city of West Hollywood to get this Target, Best Buy, etc., located here on that intersection on their side of the street rather than on the Los Angeles side of the street. And thinking as a business owner, where would you want to be? Do you want to be on the one that has the overhead utilities, or would you want to be on the one that has a nice streetscape? I think the answer is relatively easy. And so this goes to show you what is the financial impact that if a city puts an investment in its infrastructure, into the character and quality of its streetscape, what does it get back in return? And the answer in this situation is it gets back revenue in return and an enhanced quality of life for its residents. So the question is, are we building great streets, or are we just building streets that move a lot of traffic? Here's an interesting example here. I was just up on Craig Road, and I'd never really paid attention to this, but Craig Road has a very large graveled median in the middle of it with absolutely nothing. If you look at the example on the left, this is a street in Berlin that has approximately the same dimensions as Craig Road, but in their median, they've got this wonderful landscaped area that serves as a recreation trail, if you will. And something similar could be done very easily on Craig Road. It's just a matter of having the foresight and the vision of how can we use that and how can it contribute to the viability of our city and the livability of our city. So just like great neighborhoods, how do we start getting great streets? Again, it's a two-part answer. Number one, in terms of new streets, we need to have standards that require them to be great streets. And then secondly, with existing streets, we need to go back and enhance our existing corridors. Relative to new streets, you just saw last Wednesday our transportation and streets and highways element. One of the recommendations in that document is for having complete streets, and I'll get into what complete streets are in just a moment. And then secondly, it does encourage us to pursue streetscape enhancements in the city of Las Vegas. Also, as part of this exercise, in terms of updating our Title 19, we'll be looking at our streetscape standards and our street standards there as well, so that we're able to address that with new streets that are developed in the city of Las Vegas. Let me get into the concept of what complete streets are. By definition, complete streets are enabled to, are designed to enhance safe access for all users. That means not just vehicles, but also pedestrians, bicycles, and transit. In terms of complete streets, they'll generally include the following: protected sidewalks, bike lanes, crosswalks, refuge medians for pedestrians, bus pull-out areas, and streetscape street trees. And again, that might be modified somewhat just based on conditions of the street. Union Park is one of the areas where we've already done that in adopting the Union Park Schematic Streetscape Design Standards back in 2007, where we came in first with an entire design for the street showing the sidewalks for pedestrians, where the bus pullouts are going to be on Grand Central Parkway. The landscaping is in place, the medians are in place, and we're already starting to build that. And again, the development will follow. There's many benefits to having complete streets, but again, it keys back into the fact that complete streets offer facilities not only for vehicles, not only move traffic, but also accommodate pedestrians, and contributes back to the idea of having walkable neighborhoods. There's another concept out there that we can look at for existing streets, and the concept that's floating around in circles today is the term road diet. And that talks about repositioning our streets within our existing curb-to-curb distance. Adding bicycle lanes by making vehicle lanes a little bit narrower is one of the ways that you do that. In some cases, they've actually removed vehicle lanes to add bicycle lanes, and there's an example that I'm going to show you here in San Francisco. This is in the Mission District on Valencia Street. That was a typical four-lane street prior. It had no center turn lane. It had parking on both sides. What they did was they took out a lane in each direction, so you've just got one movement lane, one traffic movement lane in each direction. You've got a full bicycle lane. lane, but then you also have a turn lane in the center. One of the interesting things about this is, again, they didn't modify their curb-to-curb distance at all. Capacity stayed about the same, even though they took out a vehicle lane in each direction. But more importantly, their bicycle traffic more than doubled, and they were able to reduce crashes because they had the center turn lane. Again, Road Diet needs to look at specific conditions of each street, but there are benefits in doing it in terms of providing facilities for bicycles, providing facilities for pedestrians, and helping us to have complete streets where we don't currently. One of the things that we're going to be looking at, one of the directions that we're going to be taking is looking at corridor plans, how we can make improvements to existing corridors. And one of the things that we've done is identified our potential transit corridors, and we're trying to work those together with plans for improvements to the streetscape, to improving facilities for bicycles and pedestrians along those corridors, and then also looking at how they connect nodes, which is a term that we've been using today, and other districts within the city itself. Corridor plans will what we help to do with the corridor plans is to enhance our sidewalks, to provide streetscape, to enhance either traffic conditions or parking or the ability of transit to use our streets. And then also, more importantly, is to define character for our streets. Again, looking at how a corridor plan might change streets within the city of Las Vegas, coming in, adding streetscape improvements, and then buildings and private development follows. Another example, adding sidewalk, adding trees, adding lights, and then again, private development follows. What we're trying to do, again, is looking at existing conditions and how we can improve our existing neighborhoods, how we can build great neighborhoods, how we can improve our streets, how we can build great streets, and then how we fit that in with transit plans. We talked about that as being an important point, that it all needs to mesh together. And so that's what we're looking to do with our walkable community plans and our corridor plans, is to fit those in with our transit plans as well, and to enhance what we already have and improve what we're building in the future. So again, as we look to what the future will hold for us, we need to decide what we want to be, what we want to encourage, and then move in that direction. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Flagg. Let me ask you this. How do you define neighborhood?
How do we define neighborhood?
We're talking about neighborhoods, and I'm not sure we have too many of them in the city here.
Neighborhood can be defined in many ways. Typically, a neighborhood is something that has a definable boundary, and most often it's a quarter-mile radius, or it might be something like an arterial street along those lines. A neighborhood can be anything, but typically it will have a definable boundary around it.
So it's not a way people think about the area in which they live as a neighborhood. I think many of us grew up in places perhaps we thought of ourselves living in a neighborhood. We had pride in that neighborhood, even it may not have been a rich neighborhood. It was just a middle-class neighborhood, but it had something to it which transcended the actual physical makeup of the homes and the streets and the wires and the stoops and that kind of thing. Do we have that here? Do we have, I know Councilman Wilson loves to talk about Ward 2, and Councilman Ross loves to talk about the Northwest, and rightfully so, because they're vast, beautiful areas, but are they neighborhoods?
Yes, we do have neighborhoods. And again, that's one of the things that the map with the red and the blue kind of showed us, is there are areas that do have amenities, but there are also areas that we consider to be neighborhoods based on their boundaries. For example, John S. Park. It has a very definable boundary of what the John S. Park neighborhood, whether or not you're looking at the historic designation or not, it has its own character and its own presence. We have neighborhoods throughout the city that have kind of a defined character. The question is, are they all great neighborhoods? Well, yes, no, maybe.
Question, Your Honor.
Yes.
Mr. Flagg, have you ever thought about moving to Las Vegas in one of our neighborhoods?
You know, Mayor Pro Tem, I wanted to.
You live close to Ward 3.
I live awfully close to Ward 3. I can throw a rock and hit Ward 3.
Your Honor, if I may.
Yes.
It's been great presentation. Absolutely understand and realize the importance of these streetscapes and the wider sidewalks and the trees. Craig Road Median is a good example, what a barren wasteland that is, and there's many of those examples throughout the Northwest. Who's going to pay for it?
Who's going to pay for
Who's
it
going to pay for it?
is a good question.
Now, does the planning department's budget large enough to cover all this cost? Are we passing this on to the taxpayer? Are we going to pass this on to the developer? We're already having issues now with some of the things in the Northwest and developers taking care of those off-site improvements, so to speak. So we've got to figure out in this formula how we get to that point of how it's going to get paid for without strapping the taxpayer.
We have one example that I'm interested in finding out how we're doing with that example. Alta from Rancho winding up to Decatur or Valley View. And we have a SID for landscaping. How are we doing on that? Is everybody taking care of their obligation? Mark?
Your Honor, this is for the record, Mark Vincent, Acting Deputy City Manager. The homeowners are keeping up with their obligations, although I will tell you honestly, that was our very first maintenance SID. And I think from our experiences, we probably learned a few lessons. One of the issues that we have is how you go about selecting a contractor to do the maintenance, and we probably started off with not the best contractor, and so we kind of got behind a little bit. But I think we've brought that back up to speed, and I think we've got probably some additional lessons to learn about it. But on a long-term basis, the SID process can be difficult because if we do get in a situation where people aren't keeping up with their SID payments, the rules for maintenance SIDs are the same for infrastructure SIDs, which can result in a foreclosure process, which is pretty onerous for the homeowner.
Do we have any other projects like that within the city?
Well, certainly Fremont East, the entertainment district, is an example of that.
Well, again, this, of course, is when, the economy was pretty good. Mayor, if you recall, we did Eastern Avenue from about Fremont Street over to Washington, down a little bit towards Owens. And then, to me, one of the things I'm really, really proud of is what we did over on St. Louis Avenue. And St. Louis Avenue was what we've seen on a couple of the slides. And it has become more pedestrian friendly. And I go by there 3 or 4 times a month, and I always see 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 bicyclists going up and down the street. So it does work. But again, that was with CIP money.
I think one of the important things is you have to have a plan in place first, and then that allows you to determine how you're going to fund that. For example, with the federal stimulus package, those are projects that are ready to go, and we don't have anything ready to go in terms of corridor plans yet. So the idea is that we need to get those plans developed and in place so that when opportunities such as that come along, or NDOT enhancement funds, or there's a variety of different grants that we can apply for that help us with existing corridors, we just need to have a plan in place so that once those funds become available, we can compete for them and then ultimately implement those plans.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
Could I have, we've put a lot of money, a lot of effort, time to create a downtown. We're attempting to do that. We're actually creating a downtown west of the railroad tracks and one east of the railroad tracks. How do we end up defining a neighborhood in those particular areas, especially the one east of the railroad tracks that has high-rises that are scattered in a neighborhood, in a downtown? There's no focus of a neighborhood down there. And we need that retail and all those amenities to eventually make a neighborhood in which people want to not only live in a high-rise, but also come down on the street and use things on the street that are amenities to their living style. How are we going to pull that off downtown?
If I may, we have the Urban Pathways Project that we in part requested funding through the SNPLMA funds. And if you look now at the mayor's impetus, the first 2 projects we had were, of course, Soho and Newport. And the mayor said, well, what are we doing as a city to improve the environment there? And if you go now on Hoover, you'll see the improved sidewalks and the street trees that link those 2 projects. We do have a plan for the improved infrastructure, streetscape, and street trees downtown that will link throughout the downtown with activity nodes. Most all of you, if you don't remember the brochure package that you got, we'll be happy to give it to you again. We showed those improved trails throughout the downtown with activity nodes interspersed throughout the downtown area so that for persons who live there, they will have the opportunity to walk from project to project to the retail tenants that we believe will come into the ground floor, as has Porta Subs and Potato Valley and other ground floor uses in the downtown area. And there will be the opportunity to walk on good sidewalks with shade trees to activity nodes throughout the downtown. And that is one area where we are in process. The other big advantage we have is the new ACE route that is coming downtown that will be a dedicated, and I'm happy to say Jacob is here now, you can see Casino Center right now with the streetscape going in. You can see the improvements that are being made by the RTC as they bring the ACE downtown, where we will have those center street stations and will be linking all the way from through Union Park, through downtown, and then into the county in a regional project that the RTC is funding, and it is the first project of the new ACE route that we then hope will be the first project to support increased transit throughout the region in the future. So those are two different opportunities. One is we use the SNPLMA funds for sidewalks. We have the requirement for the developers, and then in this case we have RTC. So that's just an example of three different funding sources that'll make the kinds of improvements.
But Margo, how do we incentivize the market and the drugstore and the dry cleaners and all those to come into this area that's a downtown that's separated? We need to help that issue happen. That's what we really have to do to make it a true downtown, a neighborhood.
Correct.
I see in Washington, D.C., which is all over that town.
And we're in the beginning stages.
I understand.
And as we said, what we hope to do is create all of these different types of neighborhoods, of the 5 different types that we talked about, urban to suburban, and create the zoning that's necessary, get the transit routes in place, and have the plans ready so that we have the opportunity, whether it's public money or private money or whether it's federal money, that we can make these kinds of improvements, and we need to be ready to do so.
Thank you. Mayor Goodman?
Yes, please.
Flynn, great presentation. You hit on a lot of key points. I was very pleased to see through the presentation the type of communities that we should have. And looking at the presentation, the light bulb went off in my head as far as West Las Vegas being exactly what you've described. It's ready to go now. The only thing that it lacks is the capital to make it happen, whether it be the cottage concept that Mr. Perigo mentioned and Councilman Ross mentions that has yet to come about in Ward 6. I mean, there's areas in this in portions of my ward that is primed for it, being that it has the smaller streets and wider sidewalks, and areas that lack sidewalks, but enough room to place those sidewalks in order to create the description in which you presented here today. I too want to know how, in fact, we plan to move forward as far as identifying the revenue stream in order to accomplish this much-needed goal that all of you have come before us and presented today.
The goal is to present this notion of neighborhood walkable communities to you today. If there is the interest, which we think we're hearing and we hope we're hearing, then we move forward, and as Councilman Ross indicated, with the private sector, to start creating these plans to get those priorities set so that we can then move into the phase to, first of all, we'll ensure the opportunity for investment, and then we'll pursue, again, whether it be public or whether it be private or whether it be federal or other funding sources, and that those funding sources will be identified as potential funding sources as part of the plan.
Mr. Mayor.
Sorry, Commissioner.
I'm pleased to say that I think Las Vegas is, in terms of our design standards, far and away ahead of the other municipalities. And it really comes to light to me when I visit my mom. She lives in an older part of Henderson, but we often go to some of the newer areas and some infill pieces, and I look at them, and with all due respect, it's brand new housing. And I say, wow, this is really ugly. These are ghettos in waiting. And for one major reason, there are no substantial design standards. There's no trees around many of the developments. They've failed to take what I think is a relatively modest expense in the overall cost of the housing and put it in on the front end. And what will happen is, I think somewhere down the road, the city will have to step up and look at ways of putting it in and doing SIDs or whatever to fund that. So I think we as a city, in terms of Las Vegas, in terms of housing development, new housing development, have done an outstanding job in creating those treescapes and landscaping in projects. My thought is, as we develop streetscapes, and we want that shade and that pedestrian orientation and connectivity, that if nothing else, maybe we can stub them out for irrigation. So if there isn't money for tree gates, and if there isn't money for trees, at least we have the big expense when they build the roads and when they put in the sidewalks to put in the irrigation. So it would be a matter of turning on the spigot, and putting in a drip system, and the cost would be hundreds and not hundreds of thousands. So as we build, maybe that's something to look at. The Colorado Boulevard, or Casino Center Boulevard, I think what we did down there, Mayor Pro Tem, in our ward, is just, it's phenomenal. One day we'll have a tree canopy on both sides of the street, and that's through the city's initiative. That'll revitalize that entire corridor. So it took a little vision.
And with regard to the street tree issues, as you know, Mr. Perigo is constantly seeking funding sources, and I am certain that once the urban forestry initiative is completed, and then he will be able to go out and seek and obtain those funds that we need for street trees. Isn't that right, Mr. Perigo?
You're his boss. What's he going to say? Thank you. I don't think anybody in this room would disagree that all of these proposals look great. And we'd all, or most of us, like to live in neighborhoods like this. I mean, some of us still want the rural tone, but generally speaking, I don't think anybody is against any of this. But just to segue from what Councilman Ross said about who's going to pay for this, when I moved into my neighborhood of Summerlin 12 years ago, I knew that I was going to have to pay certain fees to support the greenscapes and the infrastructure and all that. Now, I live in one of the more affluent neighborhoods in the city, and we know that. So my question is this, and perhaps this is a better question for Mr. Paisano.
I knew it.
Mr. Paisano, have there been any studies done, or what's your feeling on just the private person, the neighborhood person himself, the homeowner? Is there a willingness on the part of the homeowner to chip in and help pay for some of the things we're talking about? Well, that's an SID for certain improvements of like Alta and stuff, but I'm talking about for larger things. Are people willing to pay for this?
We have seen TIF structures in some cities across the country, particularly in the Midwest, where they have come forward with a plan that did include neighborhoods, and there's votes on these, and the votes have been positive, including the neighborhood community. I mean, a TIF, any kind of a district, will have a vote associated with it. It depends on where they've been successful. They've come forth with plans that, or with programs that really do show improvements to the neighborhood that the residences have been willing to support. I think it's a hard sell when you go into neighborhoods, and I think the more, I mean, speaking candidly, I think the objective is to come forth with a plan for an area where the neighborhoods find that that the plan is acceptable and they won't reject it because it intrudes on what they consider the neighborhood the character of the neighborhoods. And then the properties that are really benefiting, that are included in the zone or the district, are those that are really benefiting from it. Now, is it possible for those to extend into the neighborhood? I think it's possible. I haven't seen a lot of them, but I have seen some. Now, the real issue on the table is if you're going to take this approach to improvements, do you have the authority to do that, number one? And two, how you go about doing it is really critical. Now let me just say that there have been other approaches that I've seen within our state where we have used assessment financing, and where assessment districts have been put in for improvements to portions of communities, and also the assessment districts in some instances will include residential, and those have been successful. They've been on street lighting, they've been on flood, I've seen some park and open space be successful. I don't know if that answers your question or not, but.
Virgo?
Just real quick in terms of funding, Hoover Casino Center, now we're doing First Street from Boulder Plaza to for about 4 or 5 blocks. I think it was about $2 to $3 million to do all of that. And remember, part of the presentation is that as we make these improvements, the property values increase, and we get in the long term, we get that investment pays for itself over and again. And if we put the plans in place and we start just picking these things off a little bit at a time, over time, these improvements, which have tremendous lasting values in the city, they'll be in place for decades. And again, pay themselves over in property tax revenues as those property values continue to increase. I think that's the key to funding these. I don't think it should be thought of as some sort of massive investment. If you remember my presentation, we're looking at about $1.8 billion worth of capital projects over the next 5 years. Picking these things off a little bit at a time, over time, we'll get there.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
I just have a simple comment. It's not a question, but after listening to all these wonderful presentations today and thinking about some things, my opinion is that timing is everything. And it's to the misfortune of Las Vegas that we see a lot of areas that are blighted or soon to be blighted or gradually getting blighted. And if we can pick up those pieces and just take one and turn it into what your presentation suggests, it's going to be, in my opinion, a runoff where other areas are going to see how great it looks and how great it works, and it's going to be like a trickling down, and it's going to spread across the valley. The timing for this is now, because the places are starting to become available today. And how we pay for them, Mr. Ross, Councilman, that's why you're a councilman and I'm a planning commissioner, I don't know. But what I do know is that there are going to be places available for just these type of projects. And if we all work together and the money comes from wherever Councilman Ross suggests, it can work and it will spread. And I thank all of you for your efforts.
Your Honor, if I can make a comment. Commissioner, I absolutely agree. And I think it's paramount that all of the stakeholders are at the table as we move forward with this, because I would hate to see someone stand before the Planning Commission and say, we'd like you to relax these standards because of X, Y, or Z. I don't certainly want to see that at the council level. I want everybody to buy into this. And once they're bought into it, there's no excuse to come before the Planning Commission or the City Council and say, you know what, we just want you to waive this requirement so we don't have to do it right now. And that's a concern of mine. So, Commissioner, I'm glad you brought that up.
Thank you, sir.
Commissioner Goins.
Mr. Mayor, thank you very much. Councilman Wolfson said something I thought was key that went back to something we haven't spoken about today, and that's the type of people that are in these developments. He mentioned up in Summerlin that he happened to live in a more affluent area, so there was an expectation that he was going to have to pay more to get this type of lifestyle. But I'm looking at this article that we have in our backup from the Las Vegas Sun on how we'll live post-sprawl March the 2nd, and Mr. Lindberger mentioned a word, and I've heard it twice today. The second half of it was ghetto, but in this article he mentions it as ex-urban ghettos. And he kind of mentions these areas like out in Ward 6 where Councilman Ross lives, where there are long commutes from services, big gasoline bills. And if we don't fill these areas, they're going to be taken over by renters, and then the next thing you know, you have what's called the Section 8 that's in there. But it goes down to people type, and in the area I mentioned, I represent Ward 5. Like the councilman said, this area seems to fit what everybody's trying to get to here. We have the density. We're in close proximity to transit. We're in close proximity to downtown, but we just don't have the tree-laden streets and everything else. But when it goes back to people type, that's important as well, because if you look in Ward 5, the market dictates what's going on, and so does this economy. But if you've been down, and it's been in the paper recently, on Main and Orange Street, you almost have a ward within the ward of homeless folks. And so while this concentration of development right in that area is almost like a campus, but do we see incorporating some of these shelters because face it, I have a daughter at Faith Lutheran, and I'm starting to see people on the median with signs up in the Summerlin area wanting. So what's happening is the people type is going out, but they're still coming back into the downtown corridor. So are we looking at building some, I don't know how you say it, homeless assistance out in those sprawling areas as well, instead of pushing everything into the downtown area? So, but people type is what I wanted to mention in that conversation. So.
Can I just make a comment? Certainly. Mayor Goodman? Commissioner Goins, I think you make a great point. Part of this land use planning should incorporate the need for adapting to our homeless problem. And we didn't hear anything like that in this discussion, so I would assume that that's part of a land use plan, is to incorporate that social, I don't want to say problem.
I guess it's social services. I mean, on any given night now, about 10, 11 o'clock, you can go down Main Street and you can see tents from Washington going north all the way down to Owens. And during the daytime, you wonder, where do these folks go? But I tend to think they panhandle as far west as they can go up into the affluent areas. But at night, everything comes back down into this, I call it a ward within a ward. And it's sort of like a community. So while you're building this sprawl, are we building facilities for those social services out in the other areas as well?
I just wanted to make one other comment about what you said. You used the word expectation. When I moved into the Summerlin area, I had an expectation of having to pay a certain amount of money to be able to live in that area. It was, not only was it an expectation, but I remember going into my development, and part of the paperwork they give you is they give you certain documents which include advisements that if you buy a home in this neighborhood, you are going to be required to pay certain amounts of money. So it was an expectation based upon information that I was told about, and basically I'm required to pay those monies.
There's no expectation up there, though, of having a homeless shelter next to your home, is it?
No, but like Commissioner Goins said, you can drive along town center and other areas, and I'll never forget seeing one of our homeless people that come to our city council meetings. I was driving with my wife. I may have told you this story, Mayor, and we were getting off the freeway at 215 in Flamingo, and there she was with a sign, begging for money. And that's at 215 in Flamingo.
Commissioner, this is something that Councilman Barlow, I don't want to detract from what we're here for today, but he made a great point of it at our last council meeting, that we have to do something about situation there for a myriad of reasons. Potential health problems, epidemic potential, human beings involved, a lot of mentally ill who can't take care of themselves. And we're starting to, we're going to have a full court press on this, I believe. I asked the city attorney to draft an ordinance which will allow us to take in loco parentis of some of these folks who really can't help themselves and see whether we can try to help them. The situation is intolerable. But one of the problems we have, of course, there was a pretty good idea when it was, I think, ventured originally about using the prison down in Jean.
Yes.
But the wise guys in the newspapers here, they said, Mayor wants to send homeless to prison, which of course was never even within my contemplation when we suggested that facility. We're going to have a tremendous NIMBYism issue if we ever try to set up an area where the homeless will be given some kind of an encampment or something along that line, because nobody in this valley wants them anywhere near their residence. So these are real social and serious issues that we have to confront. No question. All right, Margot.
If I may, Mayor, what we have given the council and the Planning Commission on a sheet that looks like this, and we have copies available, is really the long-term 5-year outlook for the types of studies that we'll be conducting in your Department of Planning and Development. It entails not only the general plan elements that we need to meet state requirements, it's also neighborhood plans, corridor plans, code updates, the technological improvements that we want to make, and also the city's sustainability initiative. What we want to present to you today is that your planning department is not just doing plans once, but ensuring that they are maintained and implemented. And again, the examples from the questions that we received from the council with regard to, for instance, streetscape, and how do you accommodate and create the kinds of neighborhoods throughout the city that we've been talking about, and each of you were briefed in your ward where we believe that there's potential to create these kind of neighborhoods and focus our attention in those areas where you already have facilities that can build on and allow us to create the kinds of neighborhoods and communities that we believe are important. With regard to the funding and the implementation issues, I mentioned the ACE route that we believe is the start of real transit for commuters, transit for persons that live here, and transit for those that are joining the downtown neighborhood, where they will be able to go to a station and obtain transportation to shopping at the Chelsea Mall. They'll be able to go to work and go home to the residences that they choose to live in within the downtown and adjacent. We believe that that's the first step in creating a transit model that will allow for this type of development throughout Las Vegas and throughout the region. I mentioned that myself and the Public Works Director had yet another productive meeting with the director of the RTC, and Mr. Snow has indicated that he'd be willing to give you an update on where we are and take your questions. So, Mayor, if that's appropriate. Jacob, please.
Very good. Mr. Snow.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council and the Planning Commission, and the staff. For the record, I'm Jacob Snow with the Regional Transportation Commission. In the past, we've always found the City of Las Vegas to be ready, willing, and able. This year, we're seeing the results of that come to fruition with the Downtown Connector Race project, which is, in some cases, substantially complete, and I think it looks rather nice. We're very proud of that partnership we have with the city. Just as a testament to your city's willingness and capability, for the federal stimulus dollars, I would say 95% of them are being spent in the city of Las Vegas that are the transit dollars. And that's a testament to...
Margot is dancing.
Oh.
Behind you.
I never get laughs when I'm even trying to be funny, so I'm not used to that.
Margot is dancing behind you because you're getting the money.
We look forward to expanding upon that partnership. We've got the park and rides out in the Northwest that'll open later this year. That'll be your second ACE line in the valley. That'll utilize the high occupancy vehicle lanes on US 95. And those will come directly to downtown, circulate through downtown, and then go down to the Strip and to UNLV and back. And of course, the Downtown Connector Race, which you see unfolding before you. We're excited about that. And of course, the Downtown Intermodal Terminal that we expect to have the groundbreaking for that. It'll be a groundbreaking where we'll have most of the congressional delegation there as probably the first federal stimulus transportation project underway. That's May the 27th. So we're excited about that. We're looking for partners, and the City of Las Vegas has always delivered. And we're hopeful to expand that partnership. We're happy to work with you.
Thank you. Any questions, Mr. Snow, at this
Mayor
time?
Goodman?
Yes.
Yes, Mr. Snow, I've seen the plan and the design for the transit, and maybe I could be looking at it wrong, but I see everything moving from the downtown going south. What is it that you have connectability from the downtown going northwest?
We have an ACE line planned for North 5th Street to go from downtown going north. And really what we're looking for is where we can obtain dedicated right-of-way so that we can have an operation that doesn't get tied up in mixed traffic, so we can have the speed. The speed really is a selling point to people if they're going to not use their automobile. And that's one of the reasons why we're looking at the high occupancy vehicle lanes on US 95, is that we can bypass congestion that way.
So you're saying 5th Street, which basically goes due north.
Due north.
But there's nothing at this time that goes due northwest, if you will. And the reason why I ask that is because there's a great number of people coming out of the northwest down 95. And if in fact I wanted to get out of my car, I would at least want some level of comfort being able to get into the corridor, which today I can't do that reasonably in enough time due to the transit system in the Northwest. So is there anything in your plan, or how does that work as far as being able to have some level of connectivity? Because there's thousands of commuters coming down US 95 south, the Rainbow Curve coming into the downtown, and it's gridlock in the morning. So how do you weigh that in the sense of North 5th when in fact the majority of those individuals coming from the north will be utilizing our now under construction Martin Luther King, which is going to be the bridge to get everyone out of North Las Vegas into the city of Las Vegas?
Well, first of all, let me apologize because I think I didn't listen closely enough to your question. And I believe I've already partly answered that, because later on this year we're going to debut our ACE line that will connect a park and ride lot at US 95 in Durango out in the northwest, and we will utilize the high occupancy vehicle lanes on US 95 to express people in on the ACE system to downtown Las Vegas. And that will be starting the latter end of this year. And so you won't have, and that's way ahead of the North 5th Street line. But I should also add that another arterial that we have looked at that goes out towards the northwest is Rancho. There is right-of-way available in Rancho to implement a higher-end rapid transit service. So we're looking at that corridor as well. And as I discussed with Jorge and Margot last Friday, we'd like to sit down with the city and explore other innovative opportunities within the boundaries of the city of Las Vegas.
I look forward to being a part of those conversations as well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Me too. I want the commission and the council to recognize how blessed we are to have Mr. Snow in his position with the Regional Transportation Commission. As I serve on that commission with Mr. Snow, his foresight and of his and his staff is overwhelming and incredible. I am certainly learning a great deal about the transportation needs of our valley. And Councilman Barlow, you're going to be impressed when you see the mass transportation that's coming to the Northwest. And I, too, was going to suggest the Rancho Corridor as one of those routes because of the population on both sides, east and west sides, all the way out till it picks up on US 95. But he's doing a wonderful job, and I just want all of you to know that.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Mr. Snow. We appreciate it.
Excuse me, Mr. Snow, could I? I just wanted to ask, you're talking about mass transit from the Northwest to US 95? Thank you.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Snow, traffic is always an issue on all the developments coming for planning. One of the things that was raised today was this, I guess, right-of-way, street diet, narrower streetscapes to fit within the existing right-of-ways. Is that something the RTC is looking at? Because right-of-way acquisition is driving the cost of our road systems out of control, really.
We are looking at that, Commissioner. One of the things that we talk about frequently is that when we look at some of the streetscapes that we've had from the past several decades, we kind of question how beneficial those wide streets have been for the public. And they haven't been designed for multiple users. And we actually have incorporated into the RTC Blue Book our design standards, alternative designs that include the offset sidewalks, the wider sidewalks, the bicycle lanes, and Flynn Fagg even mentioned that you need to have a plan in place and then you can work on actually implementing that plan. I'm pleased to report to you that we have an alternative mode master plan that goes throughout the region that has bicycle striping and complete streets, and it has funding from Question 10 to the tune of about $150+ million that goes along with the implementation of that plan. That is for both on-street bicycle and pedestrian infrastructure and off-street and trail infrastructure. And there are operating and maintenance funds that are available to the City of Las Vegas and the county and the other entities that are part of that plan as well.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Snow.
Thank you.
I'd like to thank everybody. Before we go on to item number 5, I'd like to thank Mr. Pisano for joining us here today, Mr. Snow for your presentation, to our staff, Ms. Wheeler, Mr. Perigo, Mr. Fagg, and everybody who participated in putting this very informative session together. I think it's going to be the beginning of a real healthy discussion to make Las Vegas even a better place than it is today. With that, I'm going to call item number 5. Is there any member of the council or the planning commission who wish to speak under this portion of the agenda? All right, seeing none, this is a time for citizens' participation. Item number 6, public comment during this portion of the agenda must be limited to matters within the jurisdiction of the City Council and Planning Commission. No subject may be acted upon by the City Council or the Planning Commission unless that subject is on the agenda and is scheduled for action. If you wish to be heard, please come up to the mic. All right.
Good afternoon, Mr. Mayor, Council, Commissioners. I was very blessed to have experience in some... My name is Teddy Russell, resident of Las Vegas. My first job was insurance in Society Hill in Philadelphia at 4th and Walnut. I worked in Hillcrest in San Diego, 650 Robinson for AT&T. The walkability rate for Rio de Janeiro would probably be about 87, Copacabana, Atlantica, LeBlanc. I walk. I have 15 PhDs in walking. Sheriff Gillespie stands in awe of me as the most amazing walker. Look at me. I look like I've had 3 weeks on a lifeboat. We're not talking about climate here. I've spent a lot of time at Boca Park, Wallapai, and Sahara, which is exactly what you're talking about, but people aren't walking. The ones who are walking are the service workers, the students. This is unique. I agree exactly with the Mayor Pro Tem. I also agree with Commissioner Ross that it's supposed to play out that way, but it doesn't. I find myself being very, very uncomfortable on Fremont East. Mr. Snow will remember when I was always talking about the RTC caper, where the people actually ride the transit that are responsible for making so many decisions. How many of you people are really walking here? You have a choice of windburn or sunburn. I talked to a cardiologist at Sunrise Hospital, said she wouldn't give this water to her dog. I think we must discuss this. We must come up with innovations. I'm really encouraged with what we are doing in RTC, and we will do in RTC. But I also have a problem with saying that the subprime was just started. It's like saying that the oak didn't come from the acorn. Of course there was subprime, but credit default swaps were just enormously worse. And by the way, let's say we have a population of 250 adults, 250 million adults in this nation. I was crying alarms about Bank of America 3 years ago. Does anybody remember that?
I'm going to have to cut you short.
So what I'm saying is we will do it, but the advantages Washington has compared to us, Proposition 13, California fell apart. We will do it. We'll do it our way, and I'm glad we're beginning our discussion. Thank you.
Would anyone else like to be heard?
Hello, Mr. Mayor, City Council, planners. My name is Randy Levine. I'm the Executive Director for the American Institute of Architects, and our offices are located here at the Fifth Street School. I won't take a great deal of time. There are just a couple of things I wanted to mention. First of all, I want to say thank you for the interest and the dedication that you all have in building a more livable community. AIA has been working on this for years now, and I must say that in the last 15 years since I came to Las Vegas, there has been tremendous steps forward, and I think most recently that is due to our mayor and the dedication to building a better community for us all. 2 years ago, AIA Las Vegas hosted a Blueprint for Nevada, in which we addressed all of the issues that are concerned with sustainability and making our community more livable. In the other room earlier today, you may have seen the exhibit that was up that posts some of the important steps that we can now be taking to further each one of the areas. Renewable energy and conservation, water resources, green economic development, alternative transportation, sustainable land use, as we've talked about today, attainable housing, social infrastructure and wellness, education and green schools, arts and culture, public safety, all of which go into the planning for making a livable community. Now, this Blueprint for Nevada is a living document, and we at AIA continue to work on it continually. So I want to give you the latest update. I will pass that out to you so that you've got this as a resource and that you know that AIA Las Vegas is a resource for you. You can call on us to help with research or support your efforts however best we can do that. The next thing that I want to mention to you is we've heard some discussion today also about the government money that is being given to the state and how that is to be used, and that is tied to a term called shovel-ready projects. And it is our feeling in AIA that shovel-ready is good, but it's not as good as it should be. Shovel-ready projects are once-and-done projects. Once they're over, if there's nothing in the pipeline to continue that work, then there are going to be a lot of people who are still unemployed in the construction and building industry. So what we say is we need pencil-ready projects. And I have a pencil for each of you, so you won't forget. Pencil-ready projects, because when architects work, the whole industry works. It is the architects, beginning with the pencil and the design, that generates the ideas. When the architects go to work, they hire all of the support, the contractors, the engineers, the consultants, and then the step after that is to hire the construction workers and the subcontractors and the lighting people and the surface people. So if you want to generate jobs, if you want to jumpstart the economy, that's the way to do it. We need to go back a step from shovel-ready and look at those pencil-ready projects. Think in terms of getting in front of the problem and generating jobs. So that's all I have to say today. I thank you for my time.
Let me say this to you. You're very kind to me, but the bottom line is, and I want everyone to hear it, nothing gets done in the city without a terrific staff, without a great planning commission, without a unbelievably supportive council, and a great management team. I could be a cheerleader, which is fine, but nothing that you mentioned would ever have taken place but for everybody in this room pulling on the same oar, and I want to make that very clear.
And I do understand that. We got a great team going. Thank you.
Great team. Okay, anybody else? Seeing none, then Commissioner Trowbridge, would you please close the Special Planning Commission?
I'd like to close the meeting of the Special Planning Commission session for the 23rd.
Thank you very much, and I declare the Special City Council meeting to be adjourned as well, and thank everybody for their participation. Now, Brad's on his way over.